How well do you know yourself? Do you truly know who you are deep down inside? The unconscious mind, a concept in psychoanalysis and psychology, is part of the psyche inaccessible to conscious awareness. Despite operating beneath the surface, these unconscious processes are believed to influence conscious thoughts and actions. In other words, the unconscious mind is a part of your own mind that in many ways are unknown to your waking self. Empirical evidence suggests that the unconscious mind encompasses a significant part of a person. Repressed feelings, secret desires, long-forgotten memories, and concealed triggers are examples of this hidden self. The shadow self is tethered to your waking self, and both halves make up the whole you. Jordan Peele's 2019 psychological horror film, Us, follows the story of Adelaide Wilson and her family as they are terrorized by their doublegangers known as the Tethered. While on the surface the movie may play out as a cat-and-mouse game between the Tethered and the Wilsons, much of the themes and core messages of the movie lies veiled in symbolism, a story within a story. In this video, I'm going to attempt to summarize and analyze the movie, and hopefully come to a better understanding of what message Jordan Peele is trying to convey. Also, I'll be pointing out all the references that I can spot because I think it's fun, and because some of the references actually adds to the message of the movie. Before we begin, please consider this your spoiler warning. Also, this is my interpretation of the movie. Your interpretation may vary, so leave your thoughts and comments in the section down below. As you've already noticed by the length of this video, yes, I have gone completely insane and unhinged, and full Pepe Sylvia. But if you would be so kind as to join me, I'd love to have your company as we go down this rabbit hole that Jordan Peele has expertly dug for us. The movie begins with the text, quote, "There are thousands of miles of tunnels beneath the continental United States, abandoned subway systems, unused service routes, and deserted mine shafts. Many have no known purpose at all." Already we're starting off really early, but this is a major clue to a plot revelation further revealed in the movie. But it also conveys a core message of unknown hidden places. Note the use of the words continental United States. The choice of words is deliberate and is pointing to not one specific location, but a collective of hidden locations hidden under the United States. I think this is hinting that the movie is examining American culture specifically. The first shots of the movie begins with a newscast of storms coming around the Santa Cruz Bay. This is a foreshadow of upcoming events. The news segment ends with the graphic of Cal 11 News, tonight 11 at 11. 11 will be a number that repeats constantly in the movie as a numerical symbol for themes of repetition. The screen goes dark and a young girl is seen in the reflection. This is Addie, and she's alone watching TV. But at this moment, she's looking at herself on the blank screen of the television. She has a stuffed toy by her side, specifically a doll of a white rabbit. Oftentimes, reflections and white rabbits are symbols of self-exploration and self-examination. The act of gazing at one's reflection in a mirror serves as a potent visual metaphor of introspection and one's inner self. The White Rabbit is an obvious reference to Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. In the story, Alice follows a white rabbit through a rabbit hole, and it leads her into the fantastical world of Wonderland. The story delves into major themes such as the journey from childhood to adulthood, the significance of imagination, the complexities of identity, and the manipulation of language. The appearance of both Addie's reflection and the white rabbit emphasizes the journey of self-exploration that the character is about to undergo. Much like Alice, Addie will too go on an adventure underground. Unfortunately for Addie, it won't be quite as whimsical or fantastic. Besides the reflection of Addie, many items including the television can be seen, specifically home movies. Here are some of the movies that I can make out: The Man with Two Brains, The Goonies, Chud, The Right Stuff, and Nightmare on Elm Street. These are iconic American movies all made in the 80s. Besides being a nice nod to providing set clues as to the time period in which the scene takes place, they provide fun Easter eggs and foreshadows some of the themes and tropes that will appear in the movie. The Man with Two Brains is a 1983 comedy where Steve Martin plays a brain surgeon who falls in love with a brain in a jar. To save his new love, he has to find a suitable female body to transplant the brain into. Hijinks ensue, and he goes on a search for suitable bodies of recently deceased women. I think this is a bit of a fun nod to the themes that two different identities can inhabit a single body. Next is The Goonies, which is a 1985 adventure comedy where a band of adventurous kids discover an old pirate map, and it leads them to lost treasures located in an underground cavern. This again is reinforcing the themes of hidden locations underground, a major foreshadow of things to come. Chud, or CHUD, is a 1984 science fiction movie where humanoid monsters have secretly been living in the sewers of New York City. The monsters begin to prey on humans above ground, and chaos ensues. Spoiler alert, but the monsters are later revealed to be humans who have been mutated by exposure to radioactive toxic waste products marked as Contamination Hazard Urban Disposal, aka CHUD. The toxic waste was illegally dumped beneath Manhattan in the abandoned subway tunnels. Again, more references to abandoned subway systems mentioned in the movie's opening text. Strange mutated humans emerging from underground to terrorize the humans above is also another major foreshadow for the movie. Next is The Right Stuff, which is a 1983 historical drama film and is an adaptation of the nonfiction novel of the same name, which chronicles the first 15 years of America's space program. This film explores the perils and challenges faced by the individuals who spearheaded NASA's early accomplishments. It offers a glimpse into their personal lives and the private struggles they endured during a time of significant political unrest and groundbreaking technological advancements. This reference likely aims to strengthen the portrayal of American symbols and culture identity seen in the movie, but this one was a bit hard for me to try to make the connection, so if you have any thoughts, put it down in the comment section. Last on the list is the 1984 classic A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is a supernatural slasher film. The plot centers around a group of teenagers stalked by Freddy Krueger, a disfigured malevolent spirit. Krueger's victims are attacked in their dreams, but the consequences are deadly and manifest in the real world. To solve the mystery, the teenagers must expose a dark secret that their parents have been hiding. There are several references to A Nightmare on Elm Street throughout the movie, so I'll be pointing them out as we go along. Besides the VHS tapes, there are several other small objects around the television. A very recognizable object is the Rubik's Cube. While the cube was invented in the 70s, it didn't really hit stores and gain popularity until the 80s, so another nod to the iconic decade. The Rubik's Cube is a complex puzzle that challenges the mind to solve intricate patterns. Again, another reference to the mind and the inner workings therein. In the basket with the Rubik's Cube are also other objects that appear to be toys. One looks like a ball. I think this symbolizes childhood and development of a young mind. Many theories about psychology and psychoanalysis revolves around the principle of childhood development and trauma. This could also be a reference to the 1988 dark comedy film Heathers, which is known for its satirical take on teenage social dynamics. There's also a strange wicker doll that is hanging from a shelf. Again, this also highlights childhood development and the inner world of a child. Symbolism of dolls, especially human-shaped dolls, are complex and universal. Ancient and modern cultures all around the world share the practice of giving dolls to children. Some have more religious and traditional meaning behind the practice, but overall dolls serve as comfort and play objects to children. The arrangement of objects around the television evokes a sense of childhood development, particularly of those who grew up in the 80s or early 90s. The centrally positioned television and videotapes will evoke a sense of nostalgia and familiarity in many viewers from this generation. Arguably, the television stands as the most influential object in shaping a child's mind. It definitely was in my childhood, and I don't think I'm alone when I say I learned much of American culture and what it means to be American through watching television as a child. An ad for Hands Across America then plays. On Sunday, May 25, 1986, Memorial Day weekend, a public fundraising event called Hands Across America was held. The event aimed to form a continuous human chain across the contiguous United States by having participants hold hands. An estimated 5.5 million people took part in this event, which aimed to raise donations to combat hunger, homelessness, and poverty. The inclusion of Hands Across America in the movie serves as both a nostalgic reference to the 80s and a specific emphasis on American culture during the era. Additionally, its prominence in the film foreshadows its significance as a major plot point later in the movie. Next is an ad for the Santa Cruz Beach boardwalk. with quick cuts of attractive people in bathing suits, fun activities on the boardwalk, and logos flashing in quick succession. This ad must have been very effective because the next scene is of Addie at the Santa Cruz Beach boardwalk with her parents. Her father is playing a game of milk bottle pyramid and is attempting to win a prize for Addie. He's seen with the cup in hand and appears to be a bit inebriated. He asks what prize she wants, and she looks at her mother, who says, quote, "Don't look at me, it's your birthday." Addie thinks for a brief moment and decides on the prize numbered 11, already another appearance of the number. The prize is a t-shirt, which depicts Michael Jackson's Thriller music video. In the iconic music video, two narratives are unfolding, one unfolding in the 1950s and the other one in the contemporary setting of the 1980s. In the 1950s setting, Michael Jackson and a young woman find themselves stranded in a wooded area. Venturing into the forest, the woman accepts Michael Jackson's romantic advances. However, he cryptically warns her that he's, quote, "not like other guys," before transforming into a werecat and attacks her. The scene takes an unexpected turn as it's revealed to be a movie. In the present day, Michael Jackson and his girlfriend are at the cinema watching the very same werecat movie. His girlfriend, scared by the movie, decides to leave. As they walk down a city street at night, Jackson playfully sings and starts dancing to Thriller. Passing a graveyard, they are suddenly surrounded by zombies rising from their graves. In a surprising twist, Michael Jackson transforms into a zombie himself and joins the dancing horde. Jackson and the zombies chase his girlfriend into an abandoned house. It is then later revealed that it was all a dream as she screams and wakes from the nightmare. He comforts her and begins to take her home. But in another twist, he turns around to the camera to reveal his werecat eyes. This is such a great reference to include because it's a great music video, but also it hints at the story within the story, and twist within a twist. The final reveal of Michael Jackson being the hidden monster all along is also a foreshadow of the movie, but let's put a pin in that for now. As the family walk through the amusement park on the boardwalk, Addie takes notice of things and people around her. She's also now holding a red caramel apple, all the while her parents are having a disagreement. Addie's mother, Rain, is not pleased that Addie's father, Russell, won her the Thriller t-shirt. Rain is worried that the shirt would give Addie nightmares, since Addie was terrified of the music video, commenting that Russell would know better if he was around, hinting at tension within the family. Rain notices something off-screen, saying, quote, "You know they're filming something by the carousel. You should see if they're looking for extras." But Russell only responds that he needs another beer. I think this is a cool Easter egg to the movie Lost Boys, which was filmed on the Santa Cruz Beach boardwalk, one famous scene being on the carousel. Russell invites Addie to join him on the Big Dipper, but Rain interjects, pointing out that Addie is too young. This paints Rain as the more responsible parent, while Russell appears to be rather absent and neglectful. Addie continues to look at the scenery around her. Russell is excited to see a whack-a-mole stall and decides to stop so he can play. The attendant at the stall is wearing a Black Flag t-shirt, specifically of the My War album cover. The artwork features a menacing red-gloved hand gripping a knife. Behind the glove, a partially obscured face grins unsettlingly. Black Flag is an American punk rock band. Initially met with mixed reviews upon its release in 1984, their My War album has been since recognized as one of the band's most influential works. Punk culture, a counterculture rooted in rebellion, emerged in the 1970s as a response to societal norms and the established order, themes of which will become very relevant to the movie. The imagery of a gloved hand holding a weapon will be especially relevant. As Russell begins to amuse himself with the game, Rain asks Addie to join her at the restroom, but Addie refuses, saying that she doesn't need to go. A reluctant Rain asks Russell to watch their daughter, to which he responds, quote, "I'm watching." It is clear that he is in fact not watching Addie, as he is fixated on the game. Before walking off, Rain tells Addie to stay close. Addie remains for a short time, watching her father play his game, but sounds of thunder in the distance pull Addie's attention away. Note, this is the storm that was foreshadowed minutes ago in the opening scene. Addie walks towards the beach following the sound of thunder. She notices a man holding a piece of cardboard that says Jeremiah 11:11. He watches her in silence as she passes. Jeremiah 11:11 is a verse from the Old Testament of the Bible that states, quote, "Therefore this is what the Lord says, I am about to bring on them disaster that they cannot escape. They will cry out to me, but I will not hear them." This verse contains a warning from God to the Jewish people. He declares that their disobedience and disregard for his laws and prophetic guidance have broken with their covenant. As a result, he will not shield them from the repercussions of their actions, particularly their idolatry. Not only is this a reference to the repetition of the number 1111, but it foreshadows the impending calamity and retribution about to unfold. She also notices a couple playing rock, paper, scissors as she heads to the beach. Addie walks onto the darkened beach towards the shoreline. In the distance, she notices the storm approaching. As she walks back towards the boardwalk, she sees a bright attraction that catches her eye. A funhouse attraction themed with the caricature of a Native American man pointing straight ahead, with text reading, quote, "Shaman's Vision Quest, Find Yourself." The use of the word shaman here is a bit of a stereotype, used to evoke specific images and ideas of Native Americans. When discussing traditional healers, the term shaman is considered inaccurate. Many tribes prefer terms such as medicine man or medicine woman. However, it's important to note that even these terms may not always be appropriate and can be subject to debate within different tribes. Additionally, in some Native American cultures, a rite of passage exists that is sometimes referred to in English as a vision quest. However, the term vision quest is broad and may not accurately reflect the specific practices or names used by individual indigenous cultures for their unique rites of passage. In some Native American cultures, a rite of passage into adulthood involves a 4-day fast and solitary prayer at a sacred natural site. The goal is for the young person to receive a vision that will guide their purpose in life and roles within the community. Elders in the tribe then interpret the vision to help guide the young person's journey. The use of this stereotypical racist depiction of indigenous people is poignant and intentional. It is highlighting the power imbalance between Americans and indigenous people. An important rite of passage is reduced to a funhouse experience on a boardwalk. Important figures in Native communities turned into advertisement mascots, a community hidden within the United States that has been co-opted, rebranded, and monetized. Addie is drawn to the funhouse, and as she stares at it in wonder, she drops the caramel apple. The symbolism and cultural significance of apples can vary greatly depending on how they're interpreted, but I interpret the apple here to a biblical reference of Eve and the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge. In the biblical narrative of the Garden of Eden, the forbidden fruit refers to the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God commanded Adam and Eve not to eat from this tree. However, they disobeyed the command, leading to their expulsion from Eden. The fruit is not described as an apple in the Bible, but it is often depicted as an apple in artworks, most likely due to a pun or misunderstanding between two very similar Latin nouns. In the book of Genesis, a serpent tempts Eve, quote, "And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Eve gives the fruit to Adam, and both gain forbidden knowledge. They become aware of their nakedness, and make clothes out of fig leaves. I think the apple in the movie is symbolic of this temptation and exploration of forbidden knowledge. Addie is about to undergo her own quest to seek hidden and forbidden knowledge of her own self. Right when the apple falls to the sand, so does the first drops of rain. The storm rages behind Addie as she enters the funhouse. An ominous sign indeed, but also a symbol of the coming change and turmoil Addie is about to experience. The funhouse tagline, "Find Yourself," is a fitting reflection of Addie's journey as she embarks on her own personal vision quests within its walls. She is startled when an animatronic owl pops out of a wall. Her breathing becomes heavy as she grows more frightened. As she enters the mirror section of the funhouse, the power goes out and she is trapped in darkness. Seeing an emergency light in the distance, Addie follows it only to walk directly into a mirror. The reflections around the room disorient her, and she could not find her way out. Distant clattering noise can be heard, and it frightens her even more. So she begins to whistle a tune of Itsy Bitsy Spider. This calms her, and she begins to move around the mirrored maze, but stops when a discordant whistling responds to her own whistling. The strange whistling is not of any recognizable tune, and confuses Addie. Looking around, she walks backwards into a frightening discovery. She finds in an unnerving scene what seems to be a reflection at first, but is in fact another her, another Addie. This other Addie is faced away from her, and Addie can only see the back of their head. The scene then cuts to Addie, her face horrified by a discovery that the audience cannot see. This scene really reminds me of a scene in Black Swan, where the protagonist Nina begins to see an alternative version of herself. In one scene, she is practicing ballet. The reflection in the mirror begins to fall out of sync with herself, turning to face the back of Nina's own head. Black Swan 2 dwells into the human psyche as two opposing cells battle for control, leading to a violent confrontation. The scene changes from Addie's terrified face to a close-up shot of a white rabbit, while ominous choir chanting begins. The white rabbit imagery not only holds symbolic meaning, but also serves as an invitation to the audience, beckoning them to join in a fantastical yet terrifying journey, much like Alice descends into the rabbit hole. The camera pans out and rows of cages are revealed, all neatly stacked and aligned. In front of the rabbit cages are also what appears to be desks and chairs, like the ones seen at a school. I think this hints at a child's mental development as they grow. The scene then cuts to beautiful aerials of a vast forest. A lone car can be seen driving down a road. This shot is very reminiscent of the famous opening scene to the 1980s classic, The Shining. Of course, this is a foreshadow of the family heading into danger. But instead of ominous instrumental music playing like in The Shining, Janelle Monáe's I Like That begins to play. The back window displays a vinyl sticker depicting each family member as a stick figure, a common practice and familiar sight to many Americans, signifying that this is a typical American family. The song continues, and as the shot transitions to a close-up of a sleeping adult Addie through the car window, the lyrics of the song playing goes as follows, quote, "Sometimes a mystery, sometimes I'm free, depending on my mood or my attitude. Sometimes I want to roll or stay at home. Walking contradiction, guess I'm factual and fiction. I'm always left, of center, and that's right where I belong." These lines are about duality in one person, hinting at Addie's dual nature. Addie wakes as her husband Gabe turns off the music. He gives Addie a sly smile and holds his finger to his lips, a sign for her to keep quiet. His sudden shout of "We made it" startles Zora and Jason in the back seat. They object to the loud awakening, but everyone seems to be in good spirits, and they all banter as they unpack the car. It appears to have been a long trip for the family. Inside, the camera pans around some sentimental items in the house, a framed picture of Addie, Zora, and an older woman, most likely Rain, Addie's mother. There's also a painting of what I believe is of Addie and Rain as they pose as superheroes with capes. Based on the paneling, decoration, and proximity to the Santa Cruz Bay, I suspect this house is most likely the same house Addie grew up in, seen in the opening. My guess is that Addie inherited the house from Rain and now uses it as a summer home. The family all gathers for a meal, but I want to break down this scene in a bit more detail because it sets up so many foreshadows for a lot of upcoming events. Gabe mentions to Zora that she should keep up with her running as they are vacationing. Zora, however, mentions that she may not want to continue with her track and field, as she does not see the point since she'll never make it to the Olympics. Gabe and Addie are taken aback, and Addie tells Zora that she can do anything she sets her mind to. Zora asks if she can drive while they're vacationing, to which Addie tells her no. Cheekily, Zora responds that driving is what she has set her mind to. Jason runs off to retrieve something and returns with something on his finger. Zora mentions that her friends were allowed to drive with supervision. Gabe retorts flippantly that Zora would not need to drive if she was an Olympic runner. She can run instead of driving. He suggests that Zora should practice running on sand at the beach. At the mention of a beach, Jason perks up asking if they're going to go. Gabe tells him that they'll go after they settle in. Addie grows apprehensive at the mention of going to a beach, and asks Gabe which beach they're going to. He tells her it'll be the Santa Cruz beach, and mentions that their friends Josh and Kitty and their daughters would be there to meet them. There seems to be more tension, but Addie remains silent. Jason reveals what he has on his finger, a finger flasher used in magic tricks, but he doesn't seem to be able to make the sparks work. He says of his finger flasher, quote, "This thing's kind of bullshit." His sudden cursing shocks Addie and Gabe. When Gabe calls Jason out on cursing, Jason says, quote, "When you point a finger at someone else, you have 3 pointing back at you." Jason's cheeky retort further stumps Gabe, but Addie seems pleased and returns to eating her strawberries quietly. Okay, so here are some things of note that I want to point out. In terms of symbolism, Zora, Jason, and Gabe are all eating what appears to be fish and chips from a local fast food restaurant. Addie, however, is eating bright red strawberries. This hints at her otherness from her family. The bright red strawberry is also a major hint at Addie's true nature, due to its color association. We also get another reference to a white rabbit with Zora's t-shirt. Jason's t-shirt has a graphic of the 1975 Jaws movie, hinting to the lurking danger of the beach. He's also wearing a mask atop his head. It appears to be of Chewbacca or Bigfoot. I can't really make it out. But masks usually symbolize hidden identities, suppressed thoughts, and veiled emotions. Jason's response to his father hints at his wittiness and cleverness. His interest in tricks also hints at his inquisitive mind and his ability to deduce how things work. This scene also puts a lot of audiences at ease. The family's interaction and banter as they share a meal seems natural and familiar to many Americans. Yet there is tension underneath the surface. Addie's reaction to the mention of the beach is obviously due to her past trauma when she encountered her other self in the funhouse. The scene also sets up a lot of plot elements like Zora's running ability and desire to drive, Jason's trick ring, and a return to Santa Cruz Beach, which will introduce the Tyler family, Josh, Kitty, and their twin daughters, Becca and Lindsay. The scene then jumps to the past. A young Addie has lined up figurines of animals in a box of sand. She places a white rabbit near the center to complete the chain. This is a 3-in-1. The first being another reference to a white rabbit, the second being another reference to Hands Across America, and 3, a foreshadow of a future scene. Adult voices can be heard discussing Addie, with a doctor saying that she suspects Addie is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. This appears to be the aftermath of the night on the beach where Addie walks and goes into the funhouse. A child psychologist is evaluating Addie because she has ceased verbal communication. Addie is able to observe into the next room using a mirror on the wall. Rain and Russell are seen talking to the doctor. Russell is a bit flippant about the situation, which agitates Rain, who is clearly distressed. The doctor suggests encouraging Addie to do other hobbies that can help express herself, like drawing, writing, and dancing. Rain breaks down into tears, saying, quote, "I just want my little girl back." This line is significant, but we'll talk about it later. Russell tries to comfort Rain by taking her hand, but she pulls away. It is clear the rift between them has grown larger as a result of the incident. Rain blames Russell for what happened to Addie, as he should have been watching her more closely. Russell excuses himself and leaves the office for a smoke. On his way out, he stops in front of Addie and awkwardly pats her. It is clear that Russell is not emotionally mature enough to handle these types of situations. His immaturity drives him to leave uncomfortable, serious situations, growing more and more distant from Rain and Addie. As we see in the present day, there are no pictures or even mentions of Russell. The scene then jumps back to present day. Adult Addie is lying on a couch, but she's fixated by a spider crawling out from underneath a larger spider figurine. The spider ties back to the whistling of the Itsy Bitsy Spider tune from when Addie was trying to find her way out of the maze, and is also a visual symbolic reference to Addie's other self. Gabe pulls Addie's attention away from the spiders. He's trying to convince her to go to the Santa Cruz beach, but Addie's clearly trying to avoid it. She suggests the beach by the house, but Gabe points out that it really isn't a beach, it's more of a bay shore. Addie remains adamant that she isn't going, but Gabe guilt-trips her by mentioning how much Jason would be disappointed, especially since this is their first summer back at the beach house since Grandma died. I'm pretty sure Grandma is Rain, so I think this helps confirm the suspicion that this was the house that Addie grew up in. Addie does relent, but tells Gabe that they must leave the beach before sundown. Gabe is happy and goes in for a kiss, but Addie playfully blocks his kiss with her book before finally relenting. It is clear that Gabe and Addie have a good relationship, and that Addie really cares for her children. She's willing to go to the beach, a major source of anxiety, so that her family can have a good time. Addie goes to find Jason, but stops by Zora to ask if she knows where Jason is. Zora is listening to music on her bed and says she doesn't know. Addie, searching the basement, finds a small stuffed white rabbit amongst old things and looks on it fondly. This appears to be the same white rabbit seen in the opening scene. Yet another reminder and reference to the white rabbit. Back upstairs, Zora prims in the mirror. Again, another allusion to dualities, with the use of a reflection. Jason quietly emerges from a small cupboard. This is a setup for a later scene, and a foreshadow of hidden people emerging from hidden places. He scares Zora while wearing his mask, and runs to hide in a closet. But he props the closet open with a toy ambulance to keep the door from locking him in. This toy ambulance is also another foreshadow of an ambulance later in the film. Back in the basement, Addie finds a picture of herself as a child. She's dressed in a white ballerina outfit and appears to be in an all-white studio. She envisions her younger self practicing on the ballet bars. This small studio setup must have been built to encourage Addie to dance as the doctor had suggested. Back upstairs, Zora is annoyed at Jason's prank, and as a form of revenge, she kicks the toy ambulance back into the closet, trapping Jason inside. Downstairs, the vision of younger Addie stands in front of large mirrors, then turns to look directly at present-day Addie. Adult Addie looks back with a curious look on her face, one of deep concentration and slight fear. I think the symbolism on this scene is introspection. Addie is reflecting on her childhood. She's looking at her younger self. It is clear that she has unresolved issues regarding that period of her life. As Addie begins to look away, loud banging and shouts from Jason can be heard. Addie goes upstairs to save Jason. He's quite shaken and remains seated on the ground with his mask on. A loud honking from outside directs Addie, Jason, and Zora out to the dock. Gabe seems to have procured an old boat named the Crawdaddy. He drives it around in circles and begins to excitedly list off boat amenities. A cassette player, leather seats, glove compartment, and a rescue tube. Suddenly the motor dies, and Gabe has to bang on it to get it to start again. This is a humorous scene, but is again setting up a lot of plot elements that will become important later in the movie, like the boat, the rescue tube, and the iffy motor. The family then drives to the Santa Cruz beach. In the car, Zora tries to make small talk, and mentions how the government is trying to control the population using fluoride. When this gets no response, she says, quote, "I forgot, nobody cares about the end of the world." Conspiracy theories around the use of fluoride in drinking water have persisted since the 1940s. The reference of this particular conspiracy theory appears to be a deliberate attempt to establish a connection with the overarching theme of the film's narrative. A massive, all-encompassing conspiracy that will ultimately culminate in the destruction of the current world order. Also notable is Zora's pin, which is of a black raven. Immediately, this made me think of the famous American Gothic horror writer Edgar Allan Poe, who is oftentimes associated with the Black Raven due to his famous poem, The Raven. Interestingly, Poe also wrote a short story called William Wilson. The story follows a man of noble descent who calls himself William Wilson. William is embarrassed by his common name, especially since another boy in school also has the same name, looks similar, and shares his birthday, which, a fun fact, is January 19th, the same as Edgar Allan Poe's actual birthday. This other boy, who looks and acts like William, but speaks in a whisper, starts giving William unwanted advice. William is further disturbed when he sees that the boy's face has become identical to his own. Both boys leave the academy soon after. William, now a student at Eton and Oxford, becomes increasingly reckless and engages in mischievous activities. However, many of his schemes are thwarted by the other William. During a carnival in Rome, William attempts to seduce a married noblewoman, but is again stopped by his double. Enraged, William confronts his double in an antechamber and fatally stabs the double. William sees a reflection of himself in a mirror, but the image is now pale and bloody. It appears to be his dead double. William feels as though he's speaking the double's words, even though the double is silent. Quote, "You have conquered, and I yield. Yet henceforward art thou also dead, dead to the world and its hopes. In me didst thou exist, and in my death See by this image which is thine own, how otherly thou hast murdered thyself. A bit of a detour for this reference, but obviously the movie shares a great deal of similarities to the story. Basically, it's a great foreshadow for the entire movie. Jason continues to play with his finger sparker, but is unable to get it to work. Zora asks Jason to just explain what it's supposed to do, so they can picture it for themselves, to which Jason says, quote, "Maybe you can kiss my anus, Zora." Another sassy response from Jason, which elicited shocked responses and reactions from the family. But Addie once again seems to have enjoyed it as she tries to hide her laugh. The car falls silent once again, and Addie turns on the radio. "I Got 5 on It" by Lunas begins to play. The family all enjoy the music together. When Jason asks about what "I Got 5 on It" means, Zora tells him it's about drugs. Gabe humorously tries to deny it, telling his kids not to do drugs. The song is indeed about drugs. In fact, it's a very well-known drug anthem about splitting up the cost of marijuana and claiming $5 worth of it. Addie encourages Jason to snap along to the beat, and Jason begins to snap along with Addie. While this is a nice family moment, I think it's noteworthy that Addie's snapping is off rhythm to the music. When Jason begins to snap, he follows Addie's rhythm, so he too begins to snap out of sync with the song. This hints that there is something off with Addie, but also that Addie and Jason will be on the same tune. Like the strawberry scene, she's out of sync with those around her, but in this scene, she seems to be spreading this anomaly to Jason. When Addie sees the beach in the distance, her demeanor changes. She's anxious and on edge. She tries to put on a smile, but her thoughts go back to her childhood. The scene cuts to the night where Addie gets lost in the funhouse. This seems to take place in the aftermath. Addie, now returned to her parents, is sitting in the backseat of their car as Rain and Russell argue. Addie's attention is brought back to the present by the sounds of sirens. A man is being wheeled away on a stretcher and into an ambulance. This was foreshadowed by Jason's toy ambulance just a few scenes ago. The scene is also significant because this man that's being taken away on a stretcher is the same man that Addie saw all those years ago on the boardwalk. The same man holding the cardboard sign that reads Jeremiah 11:11, which, as I mentioned before, is referencing an apocalypse. The man appears to have been stabbed multiple times in the chest and is dead, but the sign Jeremiah 11:11 is still with him. Addie urges the children not to look, but of course they witness the scene unfolding in front of them. The symbolism behind the man's demise is clear, as he marks the first death and the official start of the upcoming apocalypse. The family passes the incident and arrives at the beach. As they cross the beach, Addie looks around to see the funhouse. The attraction has been redesigned as a Merlin-themed vision quest, aligning with a more politically correct approach and moving away from the racially insensitive portrayal of Native Americans. I think this is to reflect modern American culture. While there are efforts to move away from the country's problematic past, it is often done by retooling, rewriting, and reimagining history, erasing unseemly imagery and replacing it with a less offensive, palatable, and commercially viable alternative. American history and culture are multifaceted, encompassing both commendable and reprehensible aspects. This duality is often paradoxical, as the idealized narrative of American exceptionalism frequently overshadows the more nuanced, at times troubling reality of the nation's past and present. Again, another duality. The family crosses the beach and meets up with their quote-unquote friends. I would use the term frenemies because they don't seem to genuinely like each other, yet they still hang out. Gabe and Josh seem to have a more competitive relationship, constantly trying to outdo each other. When Gabe tells Josh about his new boat, Josh congratulates Gabe, but also pokes fun at the boat, asking if it was a dinghy. Josh also lists out the essentials like the life preservers and extinguishers, all to which Gabe says he has, but when he finds out that Gabe has forgotten the flare gun, he once again pokes fun of Gabe. This for the most part seems innocuous, but is setting up for a funny joke later in the movie. A funny thing to note is that Josh is wearing a humorous graphic t-shirt that says "Fragile," with the martini glass icon on it. I also think this is poking fun at his own fragile ego, as he does seemingly try to upstage everyone in his life, including his own wife. Kitty and Addie, on the other hand, struggle through small talk. Addie even mentions that she has a hard time talking, which is not surprising due to her traumatic past. But again, let's put a pin in that. Josh offers the two women drinks. Addie declines, but Kitty accepts. Josh, however, holds the drink away from Kitty, asking her in a mocking tone, quote, "What do we say?" To which she responds, quote, "I hate you?" He gives her the drink saying, quote, "That works." This is meant to be a quick, fun banter between the two, but there does seem to be hidden tension in Kitty's words, perhaps a hint of truth. She even jokingly mentions to Addie, quote, "I think about murdering him sometimes." A layer of hidden aggression, again masked as a joke. Kitty and Addie's interaction reveals a superficiality in their relationship. Kitty focuses on material possessions and her appearance, including hinting at a cosmetic procedure, suggesting her vanity. While their exchanges are pleasant enough, they seem to lack depth or substance, with mainly Kitty talking and Addie listening. This dynamic highlights a shallow connection between the two. Meanwhile, the children are playing on the beach. The twin girls Becca and Lindsay are doing cartwheels near where Jason is making his sand tunnels. Here, Jason's sand tunnels is another reference to tunnels and the underground. Lindsay flips onto the tunnel and destroys it. While the girls play it off as an accident, it appears quite deliberate seeing as they had the whole beach to do cartwheels, but chooses to do it so close to Jason. This is also setting up the twins' ability for acrobatics, which we'll see a bit of later in the movie. The girls aren't very sorry about ruining the tunnel and calls Jason weird to Zora. They ask Zora if she's going into the water, to which she says no. The twins ask her why, but before she can respond, Zora notices Jason walking away. Zora calls after him and he tells her that he needs to use the bathroom. The twins say in unison, quote, "Why don't you pee in the ocean?" Jinx, double jinx, triple jinx, blackout. Again, we see themes of duality with the twins, two beings who echo one another. Also, Lindsay's wearing a Black Flag t-shirt, making this a second reference to the band. Kitty and Addie begin to talk about missed opportunities. Kitty asks if Addie misses dancing, and Addie says that she does sometimes, but keeps the conversation light, joking that she peaked at 14. Kitty then begins to lament her lost opportunity of being a movie star, saying that she had booked 2 commercials before she met Josh and had the twins. Addie begins to tune her out and looks around the beach. The scene evokes a similar sense of foreboding as the iconic beach scene from Jaws, further heightening the tension. The idyllic beach setting, bathed in sunshine, masks the potential of danger lurking beneath the surface. Nearby, a man is seen literally emerging from the sand. While this is something playful, it again hints to the emergence of hidden people from underground. The inclusion of the shot featuring gulls in the film draws a direct parallel to another classic horror film, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. This serves as a subtle yet impactful homage, subtly weaving a layer of tension and impending danger. The presence of the gulls, much like the menacing birds in Hitchcock's masterpiece, evokes a sense of unease and foreshadows the impending chaos. A frisbee flies in between Addie and Kitty, startling both of them. The frisbee lands perfectly aligned with the circle patterns on the beach blanket. Addie goes to move it and is perturbed by its symmetry. A red frisbee onto a blue circle, perfectly layered on top of one another. Again, visual symmetry of duality. Kitty mentions offhandedly that she's been having many coincidences lately, while Addie is shaken, sensing that something is wrong. Jason emerges from the porta potty and is met with a strange sight. A man in a dirty jacket, standing with his arms open at both sides. The man stands alone on the beach. The sight is so strange that Jason can't help but investigate. The man's hand seems to be dripping in blood. Also underneath his dirty jacket, the man seems to be wearing a red jumpsuit. Addie notices Jason's absence and begins to panic. This triggers past anxieties around her own time on the beach, and she begins to frantically run in search of Jason. Upon finding him, she scolds him for wandering off without telling her, then immediately apologizes for holding him too tight. Addie clearly loves her family and fears that something horrible will happen to them. Her past is coming to the surface, and so is a reckoning. and Addie seems to sense this. At home, Addie still seems shaken as she stares out a window. Gabe mentions Josh's new car, believing that Josh bought the car just to mess with him. Gabe is clearly jealous of Josh's success and envies his lifestyle. As Addie heads to say goodnight to the children, the sportcaster says 11-11 tied in the 7th inning. Another reference to the number 11. This unnerves Addie as she walks away. Addie then goes to tell Zora goodnight and to turn off her phone. Like any other teenager, Zora obliges only to pull out her phone again later under the sheets. Addie goes to Jason to tuck him in. She asks for his mask before gently reassuring him about what happened on the beach, saying, quote, "Stick with me, I will keep you safe." Addie holds up her hand for Jason, and the two share a tender moment before she kisses his forehead. He points to his digital clock, which reads 11-11. Once again, Addie is shaken by the numbers. As she goes to put his toys away, she notices a drawing of Jason and the strange man on the beach. The composition is a bit unnerving, with both Jason and the man facing away from the viewer, reminiscent of the scene in the funhouse where Addie meets her other self. As Gabe is preparing for bed, Addie stares out the window in silence. Gabe is wearing his Howard University sweatshirt. The reference acknowledges the esteemed Howard University, located in the nation's capital, known for being a prominent and historically black institution. Gabe's association with Howard highlights the family's status in society. While they may not have as much wealth as the Tylers, the Wilsons are far from struggling. In fact, they have the luxury of a vacation beach house and live very comfortably. Gabe is even able to buy a boat on a whim, with no complaints from Addie. The Wilson family's status as a successful and privileged Black American family underscores societal disparities between the haves and the have-nots, positioning them within the elite class. As Gabe gets in bed, he begins to humorously position himself in a manner that would entice Addie to do some lovemaking. However, Addie is far too distracted and agitated. She tells him that she wants to leave the beach house, which puzzles Gabe. Addie tells him that being at the house makes her feel as if there is a black cloud hanging over her, and that it makes her feel like she isn't herself. Gabe mainly remains quiet, waiting for Addie to open up, and she tells him about the incident at the funhouse. Except this time, a little more is revealed. The other Addie turns, and the two face one another. Other Addie smiles a strange smile, and the scene cuts back to the present timeline. Addie says she ran as fast as she could to get away, but notably, the audience doesn't get to see this part. We only get to see Addie retelling the story as she faces a window. In fact, we're seeing Addie's reflection and not her real self, hinting that she's not telling the entire truth. Metaphorically, we are witnessing an illusion of Addie as she recounts her tale. Addie begins to get very fearful and says, quote, "My whole life, I felt like she's still coming for me." Gabe tries to reassure her that whatever happened a long time ago, but Addie continues. She faces him and tells him about all the coincidences that she's been seeing and experiencing since arriving at the beach house. Addie takes this as a sign that her other self is getting closer. Gabe tries to comfort Addie by trying to lighten the mood, but she's too frightened to be humored by him. The power suddenly goes out, and Addie jumps in fright. Gabe mentions how Josh has a backup generator for such an occasion, again highlighting his insecurity, but is also setting up a plot element. Gabe and Addie are then startled by Jason, who has come to tell them something rather chilling, saying, quote, "There's a family in our driveway." Indeed, a man, woman, and two children, their hand clasped, stand silhouetted in the driveway's darkness. Addie is terrified at the sight, but Gabe is more perplexed. Addie calls the police right away, but Gabe believes she's overreacting. He thinks it's just the neighbors behaving strangely. Gabe leaves the house to investigate the strangers despite Addie's pleas. He attempts to communicate with them, but receives no answer. Inside, a fearful Addie tells Zora to put her shoes on. Addie's expression is one of fear, but also of recognition. I think she knows and senses who the stranger is, and is even able to predict what is about to happen, with Zora who will indeed need her shoes. Gabe becomes more frustrated and tells the strangers to leave, but when he gets no response, he returns to the house. He's now alarmed and tells Addie to call the police, but she already has. Gabe, agitated, requests a baseball bat, and after hyping himself up, goes back outside with more aggression and tries to be intimidating. However, his efforts prove more humorous than menacing. This time he does get a reaction though. The female stranger rapidly taps her hand, and in response, the two children bolt off in opposite directions. The large man walks forward towards Gabe, who begins to panic. Gabe retreats into the house as the stranger begins to beat on the door. The loud bangs scare the family, who cower inside. Realizing that the strangers have gone around the house, Zora runs to lock her windows. Zora gets to the window just in time. As she locks it, she sees the legs of a stranger climbing up a tree. Meanwhile, Jason backs away from the front door, but is startled when a stranger wearing a white mask peeks at him through a window. Addie grabs both Zora and Jason and holds them tight, not knowing what to do. Outside, the female stranger approaches the front door. She whistles the tune to Itsy Bitsy Spider, and the shadow of her silhouette shows she's holding a pair of large scissors. She reaches down to retrieve a fake rock, which has a spare key. The whistling and the knowledge of the hidden key are major hints at this stranger's true identity. She then proceeds to unlock the door. Gabe rushes to the door to hold it shut. In the struggle, he loses the baseball bat through a crack in the door. He is then struck in the knee with the bat and falls to the floor. The door slowly swings open as the larger stranger enters. From Zora's room, another stranger enters by breaking the glass window. The Wilsons can only slowly retreat into the living room as the intruders enter their house. A strange woman enters the room, walking quickly, but her steps are unusual. She moves in precise and deliberate motions, almost as if she's performing in a show. As she moves, she holds a pair of scissors tightly against her chest. She pauses and looks around the room, and a painting over the fireplace catches her attention. She proceeds to stand in front of it to examine the painting. The painting is an abstract depiction featuring a prominent red figure amidst a background of shadowy silhouettes. The stranger then slowly turns to the Wilsons. She faces the terrified family, first holding the scissors threateningly, but changes her pose, her hands outstretched in a more passive gesture. Another window shatters and startles the family. Another masked stranger enters the house on all fours. He growls animalistically as he prowls around. The family are herded onto the sofa as the strangers face them on the opposite side of the room. The masked stranger goes to light a match and toss it into the fireplace, illuminating the dark room. The firelight illuminates the strangers' faces, revealing their uncanny resemblance to the Wilsons. Zora is bewildered by the situation, but Jason quickly grasps the reality, stating, quote, "It's us." Jason's doubleganger, the one on all fours, sits next to Addie's doubleganger, and she strokes his head like a dog. But her movements are strange, almost like she is a puppet on a string. Addie can only stare at her other self in awe and fear. Gabe tries to tell the doublegangers that they really don't have anything of worth in the summer house, but she begins to speak in a raspy voice. Quote, "Once upon a time, there was a girl, and the girl had a shadow. The two were connected, tethered together. When the girl ate, her food was given to her warm and tasty, but when the shadow was hungry, she had to eat rabbit, raw and bloody. On Christmas, the girl received wonderful toys, soft and cushy, but the shadow's toys were so sharp and cold, they'd slice through her fingers when she tried to play with them. The girl met a handsome prince and fell in love, but the shadow at the same time met Abraham. It didn't matter if she loved him or not, he was tethered to the girl's prince after all. The girl had her first child, a beautiful baby girl, but the shadow, she gave birth to a little monster. Umbre was born laughing. The girl had a second child, a boy this time. They had to cut her open and take him from her belly. The shadow had to do it herself. She named him Pluto. He was born to love fire. So you see, the shadow hated the girl so much for so long, until one day the shadow realized she was being tested by God." This monologue reveals a lot about the story, but I'll be breaking it down into what I think it means. Everyone has a shadow and is tethered to the shadow. The shadow people and the surface people are inexplicably linked. Events that happen to the surface people have an involuntary effect on the shadow people. Pleasant and positive experience that happen on the surface has negative inverse effects on the shadow people who instead experience some sort of pain and suffering. Why does this happen? Before I speak on my theory, for clarification and ease, I will call the tethered Addie Red, as that is the name listed in the IMDb page and the wiki page. Now back to my theory. My best guess is that the surface dwellers symbolize the conscious mind, responsible for decision-making and interacting with the external world. Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory posits that the unconscious mind holds unacceptable or unpleasant thoughts. He believed that the unpleasant memories, primal urges, and hidden feelings were stored in the unconscious mind. Hence, the tethered have to eat raw rabbit and play with sharp toys. These are representations of the primal and dangerous thoughts that are sent and stored in the unconscious. The conscious mind and the unconscious mind are part of the same mind. As such, the surface dwellers and the tethered people are one and the same, hence their connection. Both are halves of a whole, separated into two physical forms. As Jason puts it when he sees the tethered, it's us. Since the surface dwellers or the conscious mind is in charge of making decisions, they get to enjoy the experience of existing in the waking world. The tethered, on the other hand, are hidden underground, forced to follow and shadow what happens to their other selves above. What are great experiences for the surface dwellers can be nightmarish for the tethered. Quote, "The girl met a handsome prince and fell in love, but the shadow, at the same time, met Abraham. It didn't matter if she loved him or not. He was tethered to the girl's prince after all." Red feels trapped to Abraham, more like a ball and chain than a husband. Perhaps these are secret hidden thoughts that Addie has about Gabe. At times, Gabe does seem to come off as emotionally unintelligent and a bit foolish. Perhaps a part of Addie feels stifled by being married to a partner that sometimes isn't on the same wavelength. Again, these are hidden thoughts sent to the unconscious. For the most part, Addie and Gabe seem to have a loving relationship. His goofy good nature seems to make Addie laugh and smile. This reinforces the idea that repressed feelings are what the tethered experience. Next, when describing having a daughter, Red says, quote, "The girl had her first child, a beautiful baby girl, but the shadow, she gave birth to a little monster. Umbre was born laughing." I think here we see how deep in the unconscious mind, how a parent may have secret fears of their own children. Freud had controversial theories on parent and children relationships. The Oedipus complex, derived from the Greek myth of Oedipus, a Theban king who unknowingly killed his father and married his mother, was used by Freud to illustrate his theory that children are attracted to their opposite-sex parent and harbor animosity toward their same-sex parent. He theorized that there are secret competition and resentment between mothers and daughters, and father and sons. I think this is why Red views Umbre as a little monster. Because when Red describes her son, she describes it very differently. Quote, "The girl had a second child, a boy this time. They had to cut her open and take him from her belly. The shadow had to do it all herself. She named him Pluto. He was born to love fire." I think this is Addie's trauma of experiencing a difficult birth via C-section. Notice here that she does not describe her son as a monster. If anything, she seems to show Pluto affection. As I mentioned before, petting him on the head awkwardly, similar to how a puppet moves. I think the gesture is because she's metaphorically a puppet on a string tethered to Addie. She also named the boy Pluto. I think this is after the cartoon dog. Perhaps this is a reflection of how Addie sees Jason, seeing him as a defenseless puppy that she needs to take care of. He also behaves like a dog, so the name is rather fitting. We also see Addie being more attentive and affectionate with Jason than she is with Umbre. Of course, this is normal behavior since Jason is younger than Umbre, but I just want to reiterate that these are deep unconscious thoughts. Everyone has secret negative thoughts about their loved ones. I think here we're just seeing them amplified and personified because the tethered are the unconscious personified. The symbolism of tethered as representations of the unconscious mind is further strengthened by their distinctive mode of communication. Abraham, Umbre, and Pluto, despite their inability to articulate words, exhibit a profound comprehension of each other and an unquestioning obedience to Red's commands. This mirrors the workings of our own unconscious thoughts and feelings, which, while not always consciously expressed, can subtly influence our verbal communication in multifaceted ways. Our body language, tone of voice, speech patterns, and even our choice of words can be inadvertently shaped by our unconscious mind. This phenomenon underscores the fact that our communication often transcends the literal meaning of our words, even without our conscious awareness. The untethered, restricted to non-verbal communication, yet exhibiting a deep understanding amongst themselves, serves as poignant representations of this phenomenon. Red, with her ability to speak, stands as an exception. But this discrepancy opens up a broader discourse that warrants further exploration, so let's put a pin in that. Returning to the story, as Red speaks, her face is filled with sorrow, rage, and finally, rapture. The line, quote, "So you see, the shadow hated the girl so much for so long, until one day the shadow realized she was being tested by God." This is Red's epiphany and foreshadows the apocalypse of biblical proportions that is about to unfold. Much like the stories in the Bible, she is about to herald in a new age as a messiah figure to the tethered. Gabe interjects and offers up his wallet, car, and boat. It's obvious that Gabe doesn't seem to really comprehend what's happening. He has been shown to not be the most intuitive person, and seems to understand Red even less than he does Addie. Zora, for her part, knows this is more than just about intruders trying to steal from them, as she cries and tries to stop him from talking. As Gabe begins to speak again, he is cut off by a loud shout from Abraham, who proceeds to also mimic Gabe's action of pushing up his glasses. This stuns Gabe, who asks, quote, "What are you people?" In probably the funniest and best line of the movie, Red responds with a half smile and a raspy voice, saying, quote, "We're Americans." The line delivery and humor are so good. But besides the humor, it is really important to look at this line. This is again highlighting that this is an American story. The tethered seem to represent the unconscious mind of American individuals. When viewed as a collective, the tethered are the hidden underbelly of the American experience. Red then holds out golden handcuffs to Addie, and a snarling Pluto brings it to her. Red instructs Addie to tether herself to the table. When Gabe tries to object, Red threatens to cut something off of Gabe with her golden scissors. Addie slowly cuffs herself to the table and begs Red not to hurt her children. With a flick of her hand and a throaty sound, Red instructs Abraham to take Gabe outside. Abraham does so, but not before taking Gabe's glasses and wearing it on his own face. Abraham then proceeds to drag Gabe out painfully by his injured leg. With another hand gesture, Red commands Umbre to move forward to Zora. Red then tells Zora to run. A reluctant Zora looks to Addie, who tells her to go. Zora, being a trained runner, bolts out of the house and down the street. Red then makes clicking sounds, and Umbre, with a smile, follows Zora outside. She even stretches as she smiles, a predatory grin. Back inside, Red pants and gestures her hands at Jason. Pluto goes to Jason and reaches out for his hand. Addie objects, to which Red responds, quote, "Careful, he has a temper." Fearing for his safety, Addie convinces a frightened Jason to go with Pluto, but she tells him cryptically, quote, "Show him one of your tricks." Jason quickly grasps the subtle message and leads Pluto to the closet he was trapped in earlier. Red calls out to Pluto in a joking tone and says, quote, "Don't burn our house down," again referencing Pluto's love for fire. The same toy ambulance is once again used to prop the door ajar so it won't lock. Each family member is now on their own, separated and forced into direct confrontation with their tethered other half. Gabe is beaten, then knocked out by Abraham, while Jason is in the closet with Pluto, who uses matches to illuminate the closet. Pluto then pulls Jason's mask down so they can both have their face covered. Pluto is interested in Jason's finger sparker and shakes at his hand, trying to get Jason to do the trick, but Jason is unable to produce a spark. Frightened, Jason holds out his hand, and Pluto begins to mimic him. Realizing this, Jason removes his mask so that Pluto would also remove his. Pluto's face is finally revealed to be, of course, identical to Jason's, but it's covered in horrific burns. Trying to escape down the street, Zora finds her path blocked by Umbre, who has gone around and has managed to cut her off. Umbre draws her scissors, ready to attack. Zora tries to hide behind a car, using it as a physical barrier to keep Umbre at bay. They both watch one another through the windows and track each other's movements. But Umbre suddenly ducks down, tricking Zora into thinking she has gone under the car. When Zora goes to check, it turns out that Umbre has climbed on top of the car and is now menacingly eyeing her from above. Before Umbre can strike, however, the car's owner comes out of his house to find the confusing sight. He manages to distract Umbre, who moves towards the man. Zora takes the opportunity to run back to the house as Umbre dispatches the man. This leaves Addie and Red. Red stares at Addie with wide, unblinking eyes, with a look of amusement and glee. Addie can only stare back, her face full of fear and trepidation. Addie breaks the silence by asking Red what she wants. Red moves behind Addie and pushes Addie's face into the glass tabletop, saying, quote, "We want to take our time. We've been waiting for this day for so long. I call it the untethering." Red presses Addie into the glass so hard it begins to crack. In the context of Addie and Red's struggle, the fractured reflection could represent their internal conflict as they vie for control. The cracks symbolize the disintegration of their unified self, as the two entities battle for dominance. Red's term untethering further emphasizes this notion of a forced separation, suggesting a painful severing of what was once whole. Out on the boat, Gabe is able to tear a hole through a plastic trash bag that Abraham has placed over him. He peeks through the hole to see Abraham driving the boat. When the motor suddenly stops like it did with Gabe earlier, Abraham goes to bang on it. But as he steps to get to the motor, Abraham places his foot in the middle of a coil of rope. Sounds of shrieks from the shore distracts Abraham, and he bellows in return. Distracted, Abraham doesn't notice that Gabe has escaped and has retrieved the baseball bat. Gabe swings the bat at Abraham's face, and as Abraham falls into the water, his foot catches the rope and is tangled in it as he falls beneath the surface of the water. The rope attaches the life ring to the boat, so as Abraham falls into the water, so does the life ring. Like something out of a slapstick comedy, the iffy motor suddenly starts up on its own and lurches forward, causing Gabe to fall overboard as well. In another reference scene that pays homage to the movie Jaws, Gabe is now bobbing in the water. It is dark and he is vulnerable. A predator is hunting him, lurking below the surface. Then suddenly a glimpse of Abraham can be seen behind Gabe about to strike. However, the boat moves forward away, dragging Abraham along with it. Back in the closet, Jason puts his mask back on, and Pluto mimics him doing the same. Pluto takes Jason's hand and once again tries to get Jason to make sparks with the ring. A desperate Jason tries a few more times before succeeding. The sudden appearance of the sparks startles Pluto, and Jason takes the opportunity to escape. He removes the toy ambulance and closes the closet door shut, locking Pluto inside. Jason then escapes to hide. The sounds of Pluto's wails and banging distracts Red, who angrily leaves Addie alone. Red goes to rescue Pluto, and the pair go in search for Jason. Taking the opportunity of being left alone, Addie tries to make her own escape. She notices a fire poker not too far away. Red searches the basement and comes across the white rabbit doll from earlier. She proceeds to cut off its head. I think this symbolizes what Red wants. She no longer wants to follow the white rabbit underground. She wants to emerge into the surface world. Back in the water, Gabe notices the boat. It steers heavy to the left, so it is essentially making a circular path back towards him. The engine once again stops, and the boat drifts close to him. Injured and stranded in the water, Gabe has no choice but to get back into the boat. Meanwhile, Addie is able to get a hold of the fire poker and uses it as leverage to break the table. She is freed from the table, but is still restrained by the golden handcuffs. Back to the boat, Gabe is suddenly attacked by Abraham, who has emerged from the dark waters. Abraham tries to stab Gabe with his pair of scissors. The two struggle for control. Thinking quickly, Gabe throws his body onto the motor and it starts. The propeller blades pull Abraham into the water and eviscerates him. With Abraham's demise, I want to analyze him for a bit. First off, his name Abraham seems fitting, for it has a similar ring to Gabe, or Gabriel, both being biblical names. The narrative of Abraham is found in the book of Genesis. Abraham's unwavering faith in God is the central theme, and perhaps the most striking example of this is his willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac. This divine command was a profound test of Abraham's obedience and trust. He was instructed to take Isaac to Mount Moriah and offer him as a burnt offering. Despite the immense emotional turmoil this must have caused, Abraham did not waver. He prepared for the sacrifice, demonstrating his complete submission to God's will. However, at a critical moment, as Abraham raised the knife to sacrifice Isaac, an angel of God intervened. The angel stopped Abraham, preventing him from harming his son. God, recognizing Abraham's unwavering faith and obedience, provided a ram caught in a thicket as a substitute for Isaac. This act reaffirmed God's covenant with Abraham and highlighted the value God placed on faith and obedience. The Archangel Gabriel, known for conveying divine messages, also appear in both the Old and New Testaments of the Bible. Gabriel is the angel that appears to Mary to tell her that she will give birth to Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Abraham, being large and intimidating, yet submissive to Red, brought to mind the image of a golem. In Jewish folklore, golems are animated anthropomorphic beings made out of mud and clay. In some depictions, they are unable to talk. They're made to follow the command and will of their creator. Additionally, the word golem in the Bible refers to an unfinished human being before the eyes of God. The term golem carries negative associations. In the Mishnah, it refers to someone unsophisticated, while in modern Hebrew, it can signify dumb or helpless. So why is Abraham depicted as this lumbering beast? As I said, each character and their tethered selves are one and the same. Abraham is Gabe's unconscious reflection. While I don't believe Gabe is particularly insightful or intuitive, I also don't think he's unintelligent. In fact, I believe the Howard sweatshirt and large glasses highlights the contrast between Gabe's intelligence and Abraham's beastly nature. Abraham is Gabe's deepest, most hidden primal self personified. He epitomizes the unthinking, instinct-driven primal self that obeys Red's commands, a dynamic mirrored in the relationship between Gabe and Addie, where Gabe leans on Addie for making definitive choices. The comedic moments of the conflict between Abraham and Gabe align with Gabe's more lighthearted and humorous personality. Gabe is the source of a lot of comedic relief throughout the film. It's fitting that his encounter with his tethered self unfolds almost like a humorous skit. Returning to the story, Addie looks for Jason, now armed with the fire poker. She risks calling out his name, and Jason emerges from his hiding spot, the hiding spot he used earlier to scare Zora. Right after they are reunited, Red and Pluto emerge and follow after them. Addie pushes some shelves over to block their path, and they escape outside. They run to the car, but Addie realizes that she does not have her car keys. Zora finally makes it back to the driveway and finds Addie and Jason. Addie embraces her in relief, but the moment is cut short by Pluto's snarling and banging. Gabe, driving the boat, honks in the distance, signaling Addie and the kids to run to the dock. Red, Pluto, and Umbre follow close behind, but the family manages to escape just in time. Red stares in silence as she watches the family escape, while Umbre begins to run in the direction of the boat. Meanwhile, at the Tyler's house, the electricity begins to go out, but the family's generator kicks in to restore the power. This wakes Josh up, who has fallen asleep drunk on his lounge chair. Kitty emerges from her bedroom and tells Josh that she heard noises from outside. She wants him to go check, but Josh does not want to leave his comfortable position. Kitty has to use a stern tone before he obliges. Josh calls out to Ophelia, their automated home system, to turn on the lights around the house. A little fun fact, the name Ophelia comes from William Shakespeare's Hamlet. Hamlet's actions drive Ophelia into a state of madness, ultimately leading to her tragic drowning. Kitty, already anxious, hears the backup generator start and mentions it to Josh. Josh, however, dismisses her concerns with jokes and plays a prank at her, further irritating Kitty. Josh asks Ophelia to turn on the Beach Boys, and Ophelia chooses Good Vibrations. The twins come out of their room and ask their parents what is going on from the second floor. Suddenly, the Tylers' tethered selves emerge silently, armed with matching golden scissors. In quick succession, the twins were attacked first, then Josh, and finally Kitty. The violent scene is juxtaposed with the upbeat melody and lyrics of Good Vibrations. This scene seems to be referencing the famous scene from Clockwork Orange, where a violent gang called the Droogs, who all wear matching outfits, attack a husband and wife in their home, while the gang leader happily sings and dances to Singing in the Rain. The names of the tethered doublegangers of the Tylers are not mentioned in the film, but there is a list on IMDb and a Wikipedia page that has their names listed out. Tex is tethered to Josh, Dalia to Kitty, Io to Becca, and Nix to Lindsay. The tethered family exchange silent looks while Kitty, who is still alive, struggles on the floor. She tries to crawl to Josh, but Tex steps in front of her. He reaches his hand down as if to offer her help, and as she reaches for it, he pulls his hand back and gestures as if to fix his hair, playing a classic prank on Kitty, who begs for him to stop. Kitty then calls out to Ophelia, asking her to call the police. In a bit of dark humor, Ophelia mistakes Kitty's desperate plea to call the police, and misinterprets the command and plays "F the Police" by NWA instead. Dalia moves behind Kitty and finishes her off. Moments later, Addie and her family arrive at the Tyler's house looking for help, except Addie is greeted by Tex, who is now wearing Josh's robe, but with his strange demeanor and red jumpsuit, it's obvious to Addie what has happened. Addie backs away before striking Tex in the head with the fire poker. It's lodged in his head, and as she struggles to pull it out, Nix and Io appear and pull Addie into the house. Tex then begins to go after Gabe, Zora, and Jason. Gabe sends Zora and Jason off, telling them to run away as he faces Tex alone. Tex taunts Gabe with mocking but threatening body language and strange vocal grunts and groans. Gabe leads Tex away from the house. This gives Zora and Jason an opportunity to investigate the house and attempt to save Addie. They enter the house slowly. The police is blaring loudly as they move around the house. Zora grabs a golf club to arm herself. Zora and Jason find the bodies of Josh and Kitty first. Addie's screams directs their attention upstairs. Before going up, Jason arms himself with a geode sculpture and puts on his mask. On the second floor, they find Becca and Lindsay's lifeless bodies. This shot is another homage to The Shining by recreating the scene of the murdered twin sisters lying in a pool of blood. One of the twins is seen cartwheeling down the hallway ahead. I think this is Nix, since in a previous beach scene it was Lindsay who cartwheels into Jason's sandcastle. My guess is that it would be Nix because she is Lindsay's tethered self. Zora and Jason move down the hall armed and alert. Nix cartwheels into the siblings and tries to kill them with her scissors, but Zora is able to strike her with the golf club, knocking Nix off the railing and down onto the table below. The siblings continue down the hall where they are startled by Io, who has been doing a handstand in the closet. In the previously mentioned beach scene, a nice detail here is we see Lindsay cartwheeling, but Becca doing a handstand. I think this confirms my assertion that this is Io, who is Becca's tethered self. Zora doesn't hesitate to strike Io and to struggle, but armed with the golf club, Zora is able to get the upper hand and proceeds to beat Io to death. Now with both the surface world and the tethered twins dead, I want to analyze them for a bit. I think the use of the twins in the movie is again to hint at the existence of the tethered, a visual hint to reaffirm clues of characters having doubles. Both Lindsay and Becca come off as stereotypical mean girls. They're rude to Jason and try to bully and tease him at the beach, so it's not shocking that their tethered selves would be vicious. As my theory goes, the tethered are just unconscious representations of each character. Their cruelty and aggression is just unmasked. Io and Nix are also both names of moons, but they orbit different planets. Io orbits Jupiter, while Nix orbits the dwarf planet Pluto. So perhaps another loose connection to Pluto here. In Greek mythology, Io, a princess and priestess of Hera from Argos, caught the eye of Zeus. To conceal Io from his wife Hera, Zeus transforms Io into a white cow. This transformation was believed to be represented in the crescent moon. Nyx, the moon, was named after the Greek goddess of night, Nyx. She's the personification of night and darkness. The connection to moons likely symbolizes their status as individuals who, like moons orbiting a planet, are bound to another person or entity. Back in the story, Dalia is seen applying lip gloss in the mirror. The music that plays over this scene is reminiscent of old Hollywood and evokes feelings of glamour. Dalia smiles an exaggerated smile in the mirror, as if giving a performance to the camera or the audience. I think this is referencing Kitty's past ambitions of becoming a Hollywood starlet. Addie is seen cuffed to the bedpost, and Dalia turns to her threateningly. Back at the dock, Gabe lures Tex to Josh's boat, that Josh has named Biatch, very true to Josh's sense of humor and jokester attitude. An injured Gabe then ungracefully falls into the boat. Back in the bedroom, Dalia continues to go through Kitty's things, enjoying the new luxuries. But Dalia abruptly threatens Addie with a pair of scissors with a big smile on her face. She mimes cutting into Addie's face, but seems to refrain herself. Her face loses its smile and becomes quite grim. She goes to the mirror again and begins to cut into her own face, her big smile returning again. I think this is also a callback to Kitty's conversation on the beach, where she said she had a minor enhancement done. Dalia seems to be expressing the same desires as Kitty to beautify herself through surgery. Dalia's restraint at wanting to cut into Addie's face is also interesting, perhaps displaying Kitty's repressed jealousy of Addie's beauty. Dalia wants to cut into Addie's face, but stops herself. My guess is that she knows this would not be what Red would have wanted, and refrains. Instead, Dalia chooses to cut into her own face to make herself feel more beautiful. Back on the boat, Tex looks around for Gabe, but his posture and gesture is comical, almost like he's in an old-timey comedy or cartoon. Tex shrieks out into the night, almost as if to mime calling out for Gabe, as if they're playing a game of hide-and-seek. Tex then pounces down into the small cabin to indicate he has found Gabe in their little game. Dramatically, Gabe from the shadow pulls a flare gun and aims it on Tex, a good callback to an earlier scene when Gabe forgets to buy a flare gun and Josh makes fun of him for it. In another hilarious Gabe moment, Gabe fires a flare and it bounces around ineffectually at Tex. The two stare at one another before Gabe throws himself onto Tex. Gabe and Tex fighting draws Dalia's attention, and she approaches the window to investigate. The scene frames Dalia's reflection in the window, and we're able to watch her face react to watching Tex and Gabe fighting to the death. Her face starts off with expressions of concern, then horror, then she lets out a silent scream of agony. But slowly, this agony shifts to amusement and she begins to laugh. Again, we're seeing Dalia putting on a show. Her exaggerated expressions and amusement at watching violence seems to reveal Kitty's not-so-hidden vanity and disdain for Josh. Dalia seeing Tex hurt and killed just amuses her. As I mentioned earlier in the video, this moment was foreshadowed at the beach scene where Kitty jokes to Addie, quote, "I think about murdering him sometimes." Zora sneaks behind Dalia and attempts to strike her with the golf club, but Dalia turns around and catches the club before Zora can strike. They begin to struggle and Dalia gains the upper hand, easily overpowering Zora. Dalia brings out her scissors, but before she can use them on Zora, Jason strikes Dalia's head with the geode sculpture, killing her. Now with Josh, Tex, Kitty, and Dalia dead, let's dive into them. Josh was a bit of a bully and a condescending person, so it's no surprise that his doubleganger would display some of the same traits. Josh seemed like he enjoyed provoking people, and we see that with how he treats Gabe and Kitty. His aggravating comments and personal digs are disguised as jokes or lighthearted humor. Tex behaves in the same way, except the veneer of harmless fun is gone. Tex seems to relish the fun and humor of pulling pranks and playing games, but the malice and threat is no longer hidden. He is violent and enjoys hurting others. Kitty came off as being very materialistic and vain. She harbors feelings of loathing for her husband Josh and hidden resentment of becoming a mom. Kitty believed that if she had not met Josh, she would have been a famous starlet. As a reflection of Kitty's hidden desires, it's no wonder that Dalia acted the way she did. She relished Kitty's finery and enjoyed looking at herself in reflections. She also laughed when she saw Tex getting killed by Gabe. Clearly, Kitty's resentment for Josh is so deep-rooted that Dalia feels the same way about Tex. Dalia also seems to hate Addie, as she wanted to cut Addie's face, suggesting that perhaps Kitty too disliked Addie. Kitty and Addie were never close. At the beach, the pair seemed to have very surface-level connections, and seemed more like friends of convenience and circumstance. Interestingly, I think the names of Kitty and Dalia were inspired by two notorious real-world murders: the murder of Kitty Genovese and Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia. On March 13, 1964, Kitty Genovese, a 28-year-old bartender, was fatally attacked outside her apartment in Queens, New York. A New York Times article later claimed that there were 38 witnesses who failed to intervene, though this number is now widely disputed. Nonetheless, the incident sparked significant interest in the bystander effect, and remains a prominent case study in psychology to this day. The murder of Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old aspiring actress, occurred around January 14th or 15th, 1947, in Los Angeles, California. The case, which remains unsolved, attracted significant public attention due to the gruesome nature of the crime. Short's body was mutilated and bisected. Nicknamed the Black Dahlia by the press, a reference to her alleged preference for black attire, and the then-popular film Blue Dahlia, Elizabeth Short's murder continues to intrigue and baffle. The Black Dahlia case in particular evokes images of old Hollywood tragedy, which seems to have inspired Dahlia's characterization in the film. Kitty's demise in the film also seemed heavily inspired by the murder of Kitty Genovese. Both were surrounded by other people and tried to call for help, but no one came to their aid. Back to the story, the song I Got 5 on It begins to play again, as Zora goes to the front door to find Gabe, waiting to be let in. Gabe has survived the struggle with Tex, and declares that, quote, "The boats are done. I am done with boats." I Got 5 on It playing a second time serves as a reminder of their earlier car ride together, where the family listened to the same song. The concept of family unity is strengthened by this callback, which also emphasizes the escalation of chaotic events that have unfolded within a short time period. The family nonchalantly sitting in the dining area while being surrounded by dead bodies also shows how quickly the family has adapted to the violence and carnage. Gabe and Addie tried to call the police, but the lines are too busy, frustrated that they can't seem to get a response. But Jason asked the question that nobody has even pondered. Quote, "How many of everybody is there gonna be?" The family, grasping the ramifications, head to the television. The family congregates in the living room, where Nix's body rests among the wreckage of the coffee table. The scene takes on a darkly comedic tone due to the family's utter indifference to her presence. A news segment is airing live with a witness who is describing the horrors of seeing figures dressed in red, armed with scissors, going into the crowds and stabbing people. Watching the news, Addie notices that the reporter does not yet know that these figures in red are indeed doublegangers. Footage now plays of the violence unfolding around the country, people dressed in red stabbing people with golden scissors. Then a peculiar sight, figures in red holding hands, forming a long human chain. Gabe remarks how that would take a great deal of coordination. The footage ends abruptly when one of the tethered notices the person filming and attacks them. Addie stands and declares that they must keep moving down the coast to Mexico, which is a peculiar statement that I'd like to come back to, so let's put a pin in that. Gabe objects, saying that they should stay put, since they have everything they need at the Tyler's house. Addie retorts that all the essentials did not save Kitty or Josh. Addie says, quote, "They think like us. They know where we are. They won't stop until they kill us or we kill them." Gabe suggesting put and laying traps like in the movie Home Alone, but Addie rightly points out that the Tethered have been planning this for a long time and have the upper hand. Gabe declares that they're not leaving and that his decision was final, but Addie objects in vigor, yelling, quote, "You don't get to make the decisions anymore." With that, the family decides to leave. The family head down to the car, but realize that they don't have the car keys, so Addie returns into the house. She notices that Nix's body is missing. She grows alarmed, but sees the key on the counter. Addie runs to the keys and, sensing somebody is behind her, grabs a nearby cooking pan and turns to strike in time. Nix falls to the ground but recovers and lets out a terrifying shriek. She moves quickly on all fours and returns to attack Addie. She pounces Addie while she shrieks and growls wildly. The pair struggle for control, and Addie is able to keep Nix at bay. Addie sees one of the scissors on the ground. She manages to get the scissors and uses it to kill Nix. Jason walks in to witness the killing and notices something strange with Addie. As she kills Nix, she is letting out animalistic grunts, not dissimilar to the sounds that the Tethered make. He is stunned by the sight. When Addie sees him, she throws away the scissors and retrieves the car keys. She grabs him and the pair run down to the car to meet Zora and Gabe. When Addie gets to the car, she finds that Zora is already seated in the driver's seat, and Zora insists on driving. Zora points out that Gabe is injured and Addie was still handcuffed. Zora also mentions that she has the highest kill count, 2 being Io and Nix, but Addie points out that it was only 1 because Addie just killed Nix. Jason mentions that he killed Kitty, and Gabe points out that he killed Abraham and Tex, making his kill count the highest. The family's engagement in a macabre competition to see who has the highest kill count added another layer of dark comedy to the situation. They're interrupted when they notice a figure in red standing down the driveway, blocking their path. With not much choice, Addie decides to get into the back seat, letting Zora drive. The figure is revealed to be Umbre. Zora looks at Umbre with determination and anger. Gabe urges Zora to back the car up, but Zora instead tells the family to buckle up as she drives forward and attempts to run Umbre over. Umbre instead is able to leap over the car. Gabe draws the sunroof cover open to see if he can see Umbre, but she is out of sight. Suddenly, Umbre stabs the sunroof while letting out a loud scream, terrifying the family. Thinking quickly, Zora brakes the car and Umbre falls onto the windshield, but still has a grip on her scissors, which is lodged in the sunroof. Umbre stares at Zora, and it is clear that the pair are determined to kill one another. Umbre attempts to stab through the windshield, so Zora begins to drive faster, gathering speed. Umbre stabs again and pierces through the glass. Addie calls out to Zora and gestures Zora to use the wiper blades. Zora activates the blades, and it distracts Umbre just long enough as Zora accelerates the car and gives a sudden brake. The brake sends Umbre through the air and into the woods ahead. Despite protests from the family, Addie leaves the car to check if Umbre is dead. She finds Umbre alive but mortally wounded. Umbre is hanging upside down. Despite her injuries, she is still smiling and laughing. Umbre futilely reaches to strike Addie as Addie watches out of reach. With Umbre no longer a threat, Addie reacts more sympathetically to Umbre. She gently calms Umbre with soft hushes as Umbre passes. With Umbre dead, let's dive into her and Zora's characters. Umbre was called a monster by Red, quote, but the shadow she gave birth to a little monster. Umbre was born laughing. Umbre seems to delight in violence, and seems the most eager out of the Tethered to kill. She seems to take pleasure in the hunt, and is relentless as we see with how agile and determined she is. Her constant smile and laughs are unnerving, and my interpretation is that they're a reflection of societal pressures on women and young girls to constantly be cheerful and accommodating, to smile more. This smile masks Umbre's rage, which she is seen expressing through violence. Umbre is plural for the word umbra, which is a Latin word for shade. The term often refers to the darkest part of the shadow created by an opaque object. This word is also used to describe the area of the Earth or the Moon that is completely shaded during a total eclipse. This is a fitting name for Umbre, for she is Zora's unconscious self, her shadow self. So if the two are parts of a whole, Umbre's violence is a reflection of Zora's own desires. We see this with Zora's quick adjustment to utilizing violence in the Tyler's house, where she quickly and effectively attacks the twins, then in her attempt to kill Dalia, and then her successful killing of Umbre. Arguably, she did this to survive, but it reveals her natural instinct to kill. The name Zora also has roots in the Slavic language, originating from the term for dawn. Fitting, for Zora is of the surface world, and Umbre is of the shadow. Also, after Umbre dies and the family drives off, now with Addie driving, the sky in the back shows signs of dawn, the beginning of a new day. The family makes their way back down the coast to Santa Cruz Bay. Remnants of chaos can be seen everywhere, with bloody corpses littering the streets. Jason nervously fidgets with the finger sparker and is able to create sparks. Impressed, Zora gives Jason a fist bump. The t-shirt Jason is wearing could be a nod to the 1982 American coming-of-age movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High, so another 80s classic. Jason, sensing something, leans forward in his seat, and as the family turns the corner, the road is blocked by a burning car, specifically the family's own car. Immediately, Jason says, quote, "It's the one that looks like me." Sounds of thumping come from under the car, causing Addie to back up. Pluto emerges from below the car and faces the family directly. He begins to snap, but remains in place. Addie motions to Gabe to hand her the fire poker as she prepares to confront Pluto outside. Gabe then tries to kiss Addie before she leaves, but she refuses. Annoyed, she tells her family to stay in the car and lock the doors. Addie cautiously makes her way to Pluto, who continues to snap his fingers. A scene that was foreshadowed when Addie and Jason were snapping to "I Got 5 on it." Addie lowers the fire poker and reaches out to Pluto. In response, he lifts his mask, revealing his burnt face. He then leans to his side to give Jason a smile. In the car, Jason understands Pluto's smile. He puts his mask on and tells Gabe and Zora to get out of the car. Addie turns to see a trail of oil underneath the car, leading back to Pluto. Pluto stops his snapping and instead produces a match as if performing a magic trick. Addie tries to reason with Pluto, but Pluto is fixated on Jason. Remembering his time in the closet with Pluto, Jason lifts his arms to his side, and Pluto begins to mimic him. Jason begins to walk backwards, and Pluto also begins to move backwards into the direction of the burning car. Addie is horrified at the sight of Pluto heading towards the fire and calls out no. Jason continues further and further back, and Pluto too backs into the flames. The flames engulf Pluto, and he begins to fall over dead. Simultaneously, Red emerges camouflaged by her red jumpsuit in front of a red car, and she abducts Jason. Addie is distracted, horrified at witnessing Pluto's immolation. Gabe calls out after he notices Jason missing, and Addie turns to find that her son has been taken. She runs after Jason, her worst fear realized in a scene that echoes the previous beach scene. Before I move forward, I want to pause a bit to dive into Pluto and what he and Jason represent. The scene of Pluto self-immolating in flames is very reminiscent of the haunting image of Thich Quang Duc, a Vietnamese Myanmar Buddhist monk who self-immolated at a busy Saigon road intersection on June 11, 1963. He had self-immolated as a form of protest against the persecution of Buddhists by the South Vietnamese government. This imagery evokes strong emotions and thoughts of sacrifice, desperation, and the pursuit of change through radical action. By associating this image with the actions of the Tethered, the film may be attempting to draw a parallel between their violent uprising and the concept of revolution and protest. This connection could suggest that the Tethered, like the Buddhist monk, are driven to extreme measures by a sense of injustice and oppression. The crucial distinction between the Buddhist monks' protest in Saigon and the Tethered rebellion lies in their methods and intentions. The Buddhist monks engaged in peaceful demonstrations to protest against the oppressive South Vietnamese government and advocate for religious freedom. In contrast, the Tethered rebellion is characterized by extreme violence, aggression, and a thirst for vengeance. The Tethered seek to overthrow the existing social order and replace it with their own. Their actions seem to be driven by deep-seated resentment and a desire to reclaim what they perceived as their rightful place in society. Their actions were fueled by anger and a sense of injustice, leading to a bloody and chaotic uprising. Furthermore, this connection of Pluto to fire was made clear early when Red says, quote, "She named him Pluto. He was born to love fire." Pluto has burn scars all over his face and body, so he has seemingly burned himself before. This makes me wonder if this could have been suggested by the finger sparker that Jason plays with. Jason is able to make the occasional sparks, but that begs the question as to what Pluto is doing to mimic this action. Did he set himself aflame to mimic Jason's magic trick? As we see, Pluto produces a match with sleight of hand. Is this how he made his sparks that led to his own burning? Jason found the finger sparker from his room, mentioning that he had left it there on a previous trip. The timeline does add up for Pluto to have set himself on fire in a previous year as a consequence of Jason performing an innocent trick. As I mentioned earlier, I think his name references the Disney character Pluto, but additionally in ancient Greek religion and mythology, Pluto ruled the underworld. While Hades was the god's earlier name, it became more commonly used to refer to the underworld itself. Pluto represents a more positive perception of the god who governs the afterlife. Pluto also had a dog named Cerberus, famously known for being a hellhound with 3 heads. Perhaps these Greek references explains Pluto's dog-like characterization, but my theory is that the Tethered are physical manifestations of the unconscious mind, so Pluto's dog-like behavior must reveal a few things about Jason himself. Pluto exhibits the most pronounced animalistic behavior from the Tethered. However, he remains the least violent, and he actually never physically harms anyone. So while Pluto acts wild, he's actually the most docile of the Tethered. We see this with how Pluto goes to Red for pets, and how he eagerly begins to mimic Jason. Speaking of which, Pluto and Jason share a very strong connection. Jason possesses an almost supernatural ability to sense and interpret Pluto's behavior. This unique link proves crucial for Jason during their final confrontation. Instead of relying on brute force, Jason uses his understanding of Pluto's nature to subdue him, demonstrating that intelligence and willpower can be more potent than physical strength. In Greek mythology, the Titan god Prometheus is closely associated with fire, which symbolizes power, knowledge, and wisdom. His most renowned act of defiance against the Olympian gods was stealing fire from them and bestowing it upon humanity. This gift of fire was not merely the physical element itself, but also a representation of knowledge, technology, and the foundation of civilization. By sharing fire with humans, Prometheus enabled them to progress and develop, ultimately shaping the course of human history. Prometheus' actions had profound consequences. While he empowered humanity with the tools for advancement, he also incurred the wrath of Zeus, the king of the gods. As punishment for his transgression, Prometheus was chained to a rock, where an eagle would daily devour his liver, only for it to regenerate overnight, prolonging his suffering. This punishment highlights the tension between the gods' powers and humanity's ambition for knowledge and progress. I think this alludes to Jason's inquisitive nature. He's thoughtful, observant, and most connected to his other self. Out of any other family member, Jason seems to be able to sense and even control his other half, as we see when he senses Pluto ahead, before seeing him and making Pluto mimic him and walk into the flames. Jason is also the first one to see the Tethered outside of the beach house, rightfully identifying them as a family. Jason seems to have access to intrinsic hidden knowledge about things that are not perceived by others. He seems the most connected to his other self, a good metaphor for a conscious mind being more attuned with the unconscious one. Jumping ahead, but by the movie's conclusion, Jason, akin to Prometheus, becomes a figure who possesses hidden knowledge, returning from his trial with concealed wisdom. Addie goes in search for Jason and makes her way back to the boardwalk and down onto the beach, where she finds an eerie tableau. The Tethered are all holding hands, their human chains stretching across the beach and beyond. The camera pans to reveal the strange man that Jason saw on the beach, the man in the tattered coat. He is revealed to be the tethered doubleganger of the man who was holding up the Jeremiah 11:11 sign. He even has the 11:11 drawn on his forehead. The same man Addie saw all those years ago on the boardwalk. He was the first tethered doubleganger to kill his surface self and begin the human chain. He must have taken the coat off of his surface self, similar to how Tex took Josh's robe. Addie makes her way to the funhouse, and even though it's been themed to be more politically correct, remnants of Native American motifs are still clearly visible, as seen with the totem pole. Addie enters the darkness and goes through the painted forest. This time, as she rounds the corner and the owl emerges from the wall, Addie is not frightened. She's enraged and she smashes it. She passes the mirror maze, where she first met her other self. She investigates a small space and finds a hidden door. When she opens, a white rabbit emerges and hops away. The door also has a painting of a white rabbit as part of the mural. This scene is reminiscent of the scene with the spider crawling from underneath another spider earlier in the film. Like Alice, Addie must now follow the white rabbit into a rabbit hole. I believe Addie has metaphorically gone on a vision quest and is now about to dive into her unconscious mind. She steps through the door and finds a utility basement full of pipes, vents, electrical systems, and industrial machines. All important and essential systems that make a building operational, but are mostly hidden, unseen but always operating. An unseen world that keeps the surface world running smoothly, yet is never thought about or even acknowledged. A perfect visual symbol for the unconscious mind. Addie continues to make her way through the concrete labyrinth, further descending into the basement. The impossibility of this space becomes more apparent as she descends further down. The sheer size and depth of the basement was illogical and impractical for a cheap beachside carnival attraction. At one point, she even finds an implausible escalator that descends even further. There are lights that bathe the scene in a sickly yellow. Yellow is the color of danger and caution, a warning for Addie as she becomes more and more anxious and agitated. She is about to confront her other self, and this confrontation will be difficult and violent. She walks down the escalator and into an odd area. The space gives an unusual feeling, with primarily white and neutral colored walls and floors. Rabbits are roaming freely. As Addie turns the corner, she sees a very long hallway. The hallway is filled with rabbits, all roaming. There is a very surrealist quality to the scene, and I believe this is hinting to the audience that this is an abstract space, a liminal space between fantasy and reality. Addie makes her way down the hallway. As she looks through the rooms, we see the rabbit cages from earlier in the movie. They're now empty, explaining why all the rabbits are everywhere. In the room, there are also long rows of tables and chairs, almost like a dining hall. Cutting back to the surface, Gabe and Zora make their way to an ambulance. This is the same ambulance from earlier in the film where the family sees the homeless man being taken away. As Gabe tries to painfully make his way into the ambulance, Zora looks down the side of the ambulance and sees the strange line the Tethered had formed. Gabe says, quote, "Looks like some sort of fucked up performance art." While again another humorous line, Gabe isn't wrong, as we'll talk about shortly. Back down below, Addie makes her way to another room. This time the room appears to be a classroom. Addie finds Red facing towards a chalkboard. Red is cutting something with her scissors. Stick figures are drawn on the board, forming a human chain. My guess is that this is where Red has taught the Tethered her plan. The room is covered with what appears to be red bloody handprints. This immediately brings to mind prehistoric cave handprints. Cave paintings, some created by early humans, and others even predating Homo sapiens, can be tens or even hundreds of thousands of years old. These handprints were intentionally forms of art. Pigments were intentionally harvested and processed for their creation. This need and drive to make art went beyond basic survival, yet it was deemed worthwhile and important enough to put significant time and resources into creating them. This is perfect evidence of intelligence and sentience that existed in those who came before. This is why the inclusion of these red handprints on the wall is so significant. It symbolizes a part of the human condition, the unconscious need to create art. The Tethered represent the unconscious mind, primitive yet essential for complex thought. This primitive form of art seems to represent this basic primal spark of humanity. Red continues to cut as Addie approaches. Addie asks from behind, quote, "Where is he?" The scene is uniquely framed. Red is superimposed in the frame, but Addie can still be seen behind her. Red's face is framed up close as she responds in her raspy voice, quote, "How it must have been to grow up with the sky, to feel the sun, the wind, the trees. But you people took it for granted. We're human too, you know. Eyes, teeth, hands, blood, exactly like you. And yet it was humans that built this place. I believe they figured out how to make a copy of the body, but not the soul. The soul remains one, shared by two. They created the Tethered so they could use them to control the ones above, like puppets. But they failed, and they abandoned the Tethered. For generations, the Tethered continued without direction. They all went mad down here. And then there was us." The scene cuts to that fateful night of Addie at the boardwalk with her family. Red continues as the scene underground plays out, with the Tethered mimicking the behaviors of their surface counterparts. Quote, "You remember? We were born special." The scene cuts between surface world and Tethered one, each playing out simultaneously and very similarly. Yet there are differences. The Tethered below seem aimless and move strangely, shuffling in jerky motions, linked to those above but completely aimless. Most notably, their emotions are vastly different. Those above seem to be enjoying their time on the boardwalk, yet the Tethered seem anxious, pained, and angry. Addie's family and their Tethered versions are perfect examples of this. Russell wears a big smile when he gives the shirt to Addie, but below, his Tethered self wears a wide, unnatural smile that reads more like pain. Above, Addie simply accepts the shirt from him, but below, her Tethered self snatches it angrily. The shirt in the Tethered world also is an abstracted version of the Thriller t-shirt from above. No details or words, just colors and shapes. When Rain looks above curiously, her Tethered self below also turns, but her face is hard and full of anger. The other Tethered too are similarly suffering. As we see people enjoying the boardwalk food and drinks above, down below we see the Tethered eating raw rabbit. Also, note that there are no food or drinks in the Tethered world except for the rabbit. When Addie gets her caramel apple, her Tethered self doesn't get anything. As Red said in her first speech to Addie, quote, "When the girl ate, her food was given to her warm and tasty, but when the shadow was hungry, she had to eat rabbit, raw and bloody." When Russell stops to play the game of whack-a-mole, down below his Tethered self is punching the wall. So while the tethered are shadowing what is happening above, the actions and emotions behind them are vastly different. I think this signifies the unconscious hidden negative emotions felt by a person. Russell seems carefree, laid back, and easygoing. Yet he still indulges in alcohol and has a hard time connecting to his own family. I think this is symbolized by how his tethered self moves in a painful and jerky way. His tethered self also has facial expressions of anguish. Rain is seen being annoyed with Russell's drunkenness and neglectfulness, yet she's still trying to have a good time for Addie. However, her tethered self is enraged. Her face is full of fury, and her body movements are aggressive. Addie is quiet and timid on the surface world, following her parents around silently. Yet below, her tethered self snatches the t-shirt and glares around at others, menacingly stalking the halls. Red continues to speak, quote, "God brought us together that night." As Addie walks away from her father, she sees the man with the Jeremiah 11:11 sign. Down below, he has no sign, but he does have 11:11 drawn on his forehead. The couple playing rock, paper, scissors above are also playing down below, but they are slumped and look haggard. As Addie makes her way to the funhouse, her tethered form is making her way up. The two meet in the funhouse. Upon meeting, tethered Addie gives a terrifying smile, and surface Addie can only look in horror. Red continues, quote, "I never stopped thinking about you, how things could have been, how you could have taken me with you." The scene shows Addie standing in front of a Hands Across America t-shirt. The graphic on the shirt depicts red figures holding hands, stretching across the United States. Clearly, this is the inspiration for what the tethered are now doing on the surface world. Red chuckles and continues to cut and continues to speak, saying, quote, "Years after we met, the miracle happened." The scene shows Addie on stage in her ballerina outfit, performing to an audience. Her tethered self also performs below, but while Addie dances gracefully, her tethered self also dances, but it's more raw and primal, removed from its grace shown above. Red continues, quote, "That's when I saw God, and he showed me my path. You felt it too. The end of our dance, the tethered saw that I was different, that I would deliver them from this misery." The tethered gathers around Red and places their hand over her, choosing her as their de facto leader. Red continues, quote, "I found my faith and I began to prepare. It took years to plan. Everything had to be perfect." The tethered are shown gearing up, all getting into red jumpsuits, each putting on one brown leather glove and arming themselves with golden scissors. The tethered are now unbound from their surface selves. They seem to operate now on their own. They move with purpose and in unison, following Red's plans. Since we see them suiting up, I want to dive a little deeper into their clothing choice. So why the red jumpsuit? Well, I think this is clearly inspired by the Hands Across America graphic of the red figures standing hand in hand. Red wants the tethered to recreate this imagery, so the red jumpsuits are a perfect choice. However, on a deeper symbolic meaning, red is the color of blood, which evokes a visceral response, stirring primal emotions and instincts deep within us. It symbolizes not only the life force that courses through our veins, but also the potent urges of passion that drive human behavior. The singular leather glove seems to be an homage to the legendary Michael Jackson, aka the King of Pop. This is the second reference to Michael Jackson after the Thriller t-shirt. Michael Jackson was known for wearing one white jeweled glove during his performances. This sparkling glove he often wore was not merely a fashion statement. They served a practical purpose, drawing the audience's attention to the intricate choreography of his hands. It's also frequently mentioned that he did this to conceal his vitiligo, a skin condition that caused patches on his skin to lose pigment. By wearing a single white glove, he could effectively hide his uneven skin tone on his hands and maintain a more consistent appearance while performing on stage. However, notably, he often switched which hands he wore the glove on, so it could have just been a cool fashion statement. The glove could also be a reference to Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street, which was previously referenced early in the movie with the VHS scene by the TV. Freddy terrorizes and murders teenagers in their sleep using his iconic weapon, a brown leather glove with razor-sharp blades attached to the fingers. This grotesque glove serves as a chilling visual representation of Freddy's sadistic nature and his ability to inflict gruesome violence upon his helpless victims. So what does this mean? Besides being a nice Easter egg, there are dualities in the symbolism of the glove, not dissimilar to Michael Jackson's own legacy. While he gained legendary status as an American icon, numerous troubling allegations have been made against him since 1993. These allegations persisted until his death in 2009. Combining this with the brown glove from Freddy Krueger and the tethered glove is made more sinister. The tethered, like Freddy, resurfaced to terrorize those in the quote-unquote real world. Red continues, quote, "I didn't just need to kill you, I needed to make a statement that the whole world would see. It's our time now, our time up there." Before I jump deeper into this line, I wanted to point out that this is a second reference to The Goonies, where Mikey says, "Their time, up there. Down here, it's our time down here." Combining it with the Goonies VHS, I'd like to think that Addie watched the Goonies so many times it affected her unconscious mind, and that's why Red says this line. Back to the movie, there's a peculiar shot of Red in front of art that she has made. At the center, there is the Hands Across America t-shirt. Surrounded are yellow scissors that seem to be cutting away at black silhouettes of people. This is her plan. Red's statement to the world is one of unity of the tethered. They will rise up and cut away the surface folk with their sharp scissors, and together they shall inherit the earth. All this stems from the singular idea of unity that the Hands Across America t-shirt inspired within Red. Astute viewers might be wondering why this t-shirt is so significant to Red, and how she even got it in the first place. If this shirt is from the surface world and not from the tethered one, how did she get it? This is a major plot point, and will be part of the final twist. But I'll get back to this answer near the end of the video. For now, I want to concentrate on the scissors. So why do the tethered choose to wield scissors as weapons? The symbolism inherent in a pair of scissors is multifaceted. At its most basic level, it represents the concept of duality and unity, the two halves of a scissor. Two pieces that are intrinsically linked. They only function as a whole. This can be seen as a metaphor for the interconnectedness of the unconscious and conscious mind, the idea that seemingly disparate elements are often parts of a greater whole person. Moreover, the actions of a scissor, the opening and closing of its blades, can symbolize the cyclical nature of life, the ebb and flow, the constant interplay of opposing forces. It can also represent the power of transformation, the ability to cut and reshape, to create something new from something old. The tethered uses the scissors to cut away and kill their counterparts, a violent transformation of a new world order. So why golden scissors? To answer that, I think we first need to look at another symbol, the golden handcuffs. The phrase golden handcuffs is used to represent a lucrative financial agreement that binds an employee to their company. In the context of the movie, it seems that Red uses the golden handcuffs to bind Addie as a form of symbolizing how she views humans living above. As she says, quote, "How it must have been to grow up with the sky, to feel the sun, the wind, the trees. But you people took it for granted." The metaphor of the golden handcuffs vividly captures the gilded cage that ensnares many individuals in the superficial world. They become trapped by the allure of material comforts, luxurious lifestyles, and the perceived security that wealth provides. These individuals often take their privileged existence for granted, oblivious to the sacrifice and struggles of others. Therefore, Red uses her golden scissors to symbolize her determination to sever the chains of material attachment and expose the emptiness that lies beneath the surface of the material world. The golden scissors become a tool for destruction, but also creation, as Red cuts away the old world to make room for the tethered. Red then reveals what she's been cutting, a red paper cutout of 4 figures, hand in hand. She then cuts away, leaving 2, and turns to Addie saying, quote, "And to think, if it weren't for you, I would have never danced at all." She rips the figures apart, 2 figures that were once joined now completely ripped free. Red gently places the figures down on the ledge of the chalkboard before she approaches Addie with her back turned. Now let's pause and dive into why dance is significant in this story. Red says that she gained the respect and trust of the tethered when they saw her dance. Red also calls the dance that they performed a miracle. that led to the understanding of God. This dance happened a long time ago in Addie's ballerina days, but because the two were linked, Red too was dancing in the world below. So this explains the line, quote, "If it weren't for you, I would have never danced at all." Addie's action, in a profound and perhaps unintentional manner, served as a catalyst for Red's awakening. This awakening wasn't merely a physical one. It seems to be a synergy that occurs between the unconscious and conscious mind. This synergy often occurs during creative process of performing art. This allowed Addie to give a wonderful performance up above, but it also inspired Red and gave her the strength and power to rebel down below. The Tethered, except for Red, do not speak, and primarily communicate through sounds and body language. Therefore, Red's dance could be interpreted as a form of communication that resonates and inspires the other Tethered. A classical version of I Got 5 on It begins to play, and scenes of Addie and Red dancing in the past are intercut with present day as Addie and Red begin their confrontation. Red moves as if she's performing a dance, her movements fluid and methodical. As Addie lashes out, Red is able to read her movements and counters her easily. She's able to disarm Addie and almost succeeds in pulling Addie into the scissors. But she whispers something before tossing Addie aside. Addie's able to retrieve her fire poker and again tries to strike Red, but Red is able to easily evade Addie's strike, even with her back turned. Red then strikes out with her scissors, but Addie blocks it using the golden chain. Red kicks her away and retreats in small, quick steps. More scenes of the pair dancing from the past flashes. The two are engaged in a deadly dance, a final confrontation. The music choice in this scene is brilliant. Not only is it a great callback to a great scene, the use of the classical version of I Got 5 on It, played at a slower tempo and stripped down to just the instrumentals, serves as a powerful audio metaphor. It mirrors the way a classical song can be deconstructed into more basic and elemental versions of itself, similar to how the unconscious mind can break down complex thoughts and emotions into their core components. The musical arrangement evokes a sense of introspection and invites the listener to contemplate the deeper meaning behind the tune. The absence of lyrics allows the melody and instrumentation to take center stage, highlighting the raw emotion and underlining structure of the song. It is perfectly complemented with the different shots of Addie and Red's ballet performances that are then juxtaposed with their current fight. Overall, this musical choice is a masterstroke, as it adds depth and complexity to the scene while also serving as a powerful metaphor for the inner workings of the mind. Addie finds Red sitting in the hallway and tries to strike her, but Red once again easily evades her. Over and over, Addie tries to strike, but Red simply moves out of reach and lands cuts and blows to Addie. Addie begins to grow more wild and desperate as she grows more fatigued and injured. She grunts and screams in frustration, all the while scenes of the pair dancing ballet are spliced with the music. A wounded and tired Addie enters what appears to be the sleeping quarters for the Tethered. Out of the shadows, Red emerges, ready to stab Addie, her scissors held high above her head. Just in time, Addie turns around and stabs Red right in the chest. Red collapses into Addie, and as she dies, she begins to whistle. Addie cradles Red's face. Her face is mixed with emotions, anger, rage, but also grief. Red tries to whistle once more, but Addie uses her chain on her golden cuffs and wraps it around Red's neck. She begins to choke Red and pulls so hard that it snaps Red's neck, killing her. Addie's face is snarled, a primal raw emotion of rage. She screams out in what seems like triumph, but also agony. She then begins to bite and chomp at the air, and then her teeth begins to start clicking together. An unnerving animalistic behavior we've seen before when she killed Nyx. She grunts and pants like a beast, her face one of pure savagery. Addie then begins to sob, then laugh. We've seen another variation of this before with Dalia. Addie retrieves the keys from around Red's neck and frees herself from the golden cuffs. The symbolic imagery in this scene speaks volumes about the power dynamics at play. Addie's golden cuffs represent her wealth and privilege. Ultimately, she triumphs over Red's golden scissors, which symbolize resilience and struggle. This concept can be seen as a representation of how societal structures and inherent advantages can often overshadow individual efforts and innate abilities, creating an uneven playing field where those with privilege are more likely to succeed. Furthermore, the moment where Addie blocks Red's scissors with her golden chain adds another layer to this interpretation. It visually reinforces the idea that Addie's privilege acts as a barrier, preventing Red from achieving her goals or overcoming her circumstances. The golden chain, much like the cuffs, symbolize Addie's wealth and status, but it can also suggest a sense of entrapment or restriction. This imagery implies that Addie's privilege not only protects her, but also limits Red's freedom and opportunities, and we see Red literally killed by this golden chain. In essence, this scene can be seen as a commentary on how systematic inequalities can stifle individual potential and perpetuate social injustice. It highlights the way in which privilege can act as a weapon, both overtly and subtly, to maintain the status quo and suppress those who challenge it. A thump is heard from the nearby lockers, and Addie heads to examine the noise. She opens a locker to find Jason huddled inside. He begins to cry at the sight of Addie, but not from relief. He is terrified of her. When Addie hugs him, Jason does not hug her back. His arms hover over Addie, refusing to make physical contact. Addie tells him to look at her as she moves her hair out of her face. Jason begins to cry, unable to forget what he had just witnessed. Addie gently cradles his head and says, quote, "They're all gone now, okay? They can't hurt you. You understand?" But Jason doesn't understand. He shakes his head. Addie holds up her hand, which is covered in Red's blood. She tells Jason, quote, "Everything is going to be like it was before," as she places his hand over her open one. This is a callback scene to when Addie holds Jason's hand and promises to keep him safe. This fulfills Addie's promise to protect Jason, but Jason has discovered the truth and has seen too much. He is now changed. Things cannot return to how it once was. The scene pans away. Red's lifeless body sits still, and from the shadows a white rabbit hops into frame. The family reunite above, Jason and Addie finding Zora and Gabe at the ambulance. Interestingly, Jason has a white rabbit with him. They set off in the ambulance, and the camera pans up, revealing all the tethered gathered in the street, hand in hand. They have formed a human chain that extends coast to coast. In the ambulance, the family sit, each reflecting silently on the horrors that they've just endured. Addie stares off ahead as she drives, as old memories begin to come to her. She gasps in shock as her past replays in her mind's eye. The scene of her sitting in the doctor's office watching her parents argue replays. Rain says, quote, "I just want my little girl back." As a recap, Addie's experience at the funhouse left her unable to talk. The doctor recommended that Addie be encouraged to draw, write, and dance in an effort to help her regain her speech. So Addie begins to learn how to dance ballet. The scene flashes images of a young Addie with an ominous smile. Her sinister smiling face as she dances and as she waits in the funhouse. Addie begins to rediscover a horrific truth about herself, that she was the original Tethered, not Red. She was the one who abducted Red from the surface world and brought Red down below. As the real surface Addie slowly begins to wake, she finds that she has been handcuffed to the bed, the very same golden handcuffs that Red puts on Addie earlier in the film. The original Tethered, now known as Addie, removes her abstracted black t-shirt and puts on the Thriller t-shirt. Red can only watch in horror as Addie smiles her sinister smile and takes Red's place above the surface world. Notice the Hands Across America yellow t-shirt that Red is wearing. This is how it made it to the Tethered world, because it originally came from above. Red was wearing the shirt underneath the Thriller shirt when she was abducted. Addie now realizes that she isn't who she thought she was. She was a Tethered that escaped and usurped the real Addie's place in the world above. Sensing something, she looks to Jason, who stares back at her, his face showing suspicion or recognition. After his own abduction to the world down below, Jason now has secret knowledge. He is able to recognize the truth about his own mother. Their gazes lock. A silent understanding seems to pass between the two. Addie begins to smile and looks forward. Jason pulls his mask down to hide his face. The camera pans above as the family drives away to an uncertain future. Minnie Riperton's song Le Fleur begins to play. The camera then pans across the continental United States, revealing the Tethered all hand in hand, their human chain connecting them across the country. Helicopters are seen in the air, along with smoke billowing upwards, a testament to the devastation that has been wrought. Amidst the wreckage and despair, a new day has dawned, the rise of the Tethered. So that was a lot, so let's break it down. The numerous clues hinting at Addie's true identity as a Tethered, and Red being the original Addie, has been woven cleverly throughout the film. These clues extend beyond the overt foreshadowing of Addie's dual existence, like the recurring number 11, the reflections, and the twin motifs. Addie eating red strawberries while her family eats fish and chips set her apart. Her unusual offbeat snapping to "I got 5 on it." Her discomfort when making small talk with Kitty. Her deep-seated fear of her other self suggests a premonition of Red's impending arrival. Additionally, her non-behavioral communication, characterized by aggressive snarls and grunts, aligns with the animalistic behavior associated with the Tethered. Rain's line of "I just want my little girl back" hints that this is not the same Addie, but a doubleganger. Addie's loss of verbal speech when she was just a child was not caused by trauma as the doctor speculated. She wasn't able to speak because she didn't know how to. She is a Tethered, therefore she could never speak before. She had to learn how to speak, therefore she is not comfortable as others when socializing, even as an adult. Addie also knows exactly where to go when Jason is taken. Also, when Addie mentions to Gabe that she wants to leave the beach house because she doesn't feel like herself there, is because she does not originally belong there. She lives in constant fear of Red returning to claim her rightful place. Addie knows deep down that she is an imposter. There are also clues with Red. Her whistling of the Itsy Bitsy Spider tune is a major clue that she's the original Surface Addie, as seen when she's whistling the same tune before her abduction. Red is also able to talk while all the other Tethered could not. This hints at her being a surface dweller. She also knows things about the surface world that the Tether wouldn't, like the knowledge and purpose of the hidden house key. Another major clue is the Thriller t-shirt itself. The plot revealed at the end of the music video is that Michael Jackson was the monster all along, similar to how Addie was the Tethered all along. A bonus note is that in the music video, Michael Jackson wears a red outfit, not too dissimilar from the Tethered jumpsuit. Speaking of clothing, I want to talk a little bit about Addie's outfit. It starts off white, but as the movie progresses, it becomes covered in blood. By the end, she's entirely drenched in red, visually connecting her to the Tethered. Addie's name is also a shortened version of Adelaide, with its German origin meaning noble or of noble kin, which is a great reflection of Addie's privilege as a surface dweller. Furthermore, the existence of the city of Adelaide in Australia, which is often referred to as the land down under, adds another layer of symbolism. This can be interpreted as a subtle playful reference to Addie's true origin as a Tethered. This duality inherent in the name Adelaide encapsulates the complexities of Addie's character and her journey from a Tethered to a surface dweller. Then there's Addie's smile, which is not just a smile, it's a chilling revelation of her triumph. She has successfully usurped Red's position in the world above, achieving her goals through a potent combination of cunning, deception, and violence. This is not the Addie that Jason knew. This is her true nature laid bare. The realization is a heavy burden for Jason, as he grapples with the terrifying truth that his mother might not be who he thought she was. He conceals his face with a mask, hiding his feelings and the truth he now bears. The film ends with the visual of the Tethered all hand in hand stretching across the United States. This was Red's dream for the Tethered that was inspired by a single t-shirt, her yellow Hands Across America shirt. This was the shirt she was wearing the day she got abducted. So it's no surprise that she would place such significance on this single shirt. Hands Across America, a noteworthy public fundraising event held in 1986, aired to raise funds for hunger and homelessness relief in the United States. The core concept of the event involved people joining hands to create a continuous human chain that stretched across the continental United States. The event garnered significant attention and participation, symbolizing unity and compassion in addressing societal issues. The event's popularity surged to unprecedented heights, propelled by extensive publicity and media attention. Its cultural impact was so profound that it became an enduring symbol of 1980s America, forever etched in the collective memories and consciousness of the nation. The symbol, imbued with the profound message of unity and hopeful optimism, had undeniable and significant impact on Red. It became a powerful rallying call, igniting the flames of resistance and fueling the fight for tethered liberation. Red, recognizing the symbol's potent meaning, harnessed its power to galvanize the oppressed and inspired hope in the face of unending despair. Yet to what end? While the Tethered succeeded in killing their surface counterparts and taking their place on the surface world, what comes next? Without their de facto leader Red, who will lead the Tethered into the new age? Over time, would the Tethered gradually become more and more like their surface counterpart? A strong possibility, as we've seen with Addie's transformation. If that's the case, has this all been for nothing? Organizers of the Hands Across America fundraiser had ambitious goals, aiming to raise between $50 million and $100 million, which would have made it one of the largest charity fundraisers in history. However, expectations had to be lowered. Despite raising $36.4 million, only $15 million remained after covering costs. In the mid-1980s, Hands Across America was one among numerous celebrity-driven charity events. However, this period also marked a growing skepticism among Americans towards such events. Organizers grappled with the possibility of dwindling public interest and financial support, a concern they deemed, quote, compassion fatigue. This apprehension stemmed from the frequency and sometimes superficial nature of these events, leading to a public perception of oversaturation. Media outlets also played a role in fueling this skepticism by scrutinizing the actual long-term impacts of such initiatives, including Hands Across America. They questioned whether these events truly addressed the root causes of the problems that they aimed to solve, or merely provided temporary relief and publicity for the celebrities involved. The Hands Across America event, while a remarkable feat that saw millions of participants join hands across the United States and raise a substantial amount of money, ultimately fell short of its lofty goals of eradicating hunger and poverty. The event was never realistically intended to solve these complex and deep-rooted societal issues. However, it did manage to instill a sense of hope and unity amongst participants, fostering a shared aspiration for a better future. Despite the initial enthusiasm and optimism surrounding the event, the reality of its limited impact soon became apparent. Once the excitement and media attention subsided, the underlying problems of hunger and poverty remained largely unchanged. This stark contrast between the event's idealistic aspirations and the harsh realities of its aftermath left a mixed legacy. As the movie concludes, Minnie Riperton's ethereal voice fills the air with the enchanting melody of Les Fleurs. The song's delicate beauty and optimistic lyrics perfectly juxtaposes the horrific events of the film. Riperton's voice, light and feathery, carried the listener into a world of daydreams and possibilities, echoing themes of hope and wonder. The lyrics of the song poetically embodied the perspective of a flower, its delicate petals unfurling in the warmth of the sun. It is filled with curiosity about the world around it, the flower's innocent contemplations about life's mysteries and the infinite possibilities therein, parallels the Tethered journey of self-discovery and awakening, though the Tethered experience is a lot more violent and bloody. The song's gentle rhythms and uplifting melody served as a poignant reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow. The song perfectly encapsulates the Tethered as they bask in the sun that they were once denied. The song also perfectly goes with the themes that the Hands Across America campaign hoped to inspire. So putting everything together, what the hell was the movie about? Well, this is what makes the film so fantastic. It can be interpreted in a multitude of ways, and is deeply layered and complex. At face value, the narrative revolves around the creation of identical copies of individuals referred to as the Tethered. These Tethered are the result of a failed government experiment that aimed to control the original humans above ground like puppets. The film follows the Wilson family as they encounter their own Tethered counterparts while on vacation. The Tethered, forced to live in the shadows of the underground tunnels, have developed a deep resentment towards their original counterparts who live normal lives above ground. As the Tethered emerge from their subterranean existence, they seek to overthrow their originals and take their place in the world. However, if you solely interpret this movie through this narrow lens, you might find it lacking in depth and riddled with inconsistencies and plot holes. Like how logistically is any of the tethered existence even possible, why the government would allow the failed experiment to continue, and how or why is the funhouse a secret passage to a top-secret government facility. This limited perspective may prevent you from appreciating the film's nuances and underlying themes, leading to a superficial and unsatisfying viewing experience. So let's dive a bit deeper. The film dwells into the intricate concept of duality, exploring the multifaceted nature of human identity, the internal conflicts therein, and the opposing forces within oneself. This duality is vividly represented by the contrasting existence of the surface dwellers and their tethered counterparts who reside in the hidden underground world. The surface dwellers symbolize the conscious mind, while the tethered embody the unconscious mind, harboring repressed desires, fears, and unresolved traumas. The tethered emergence into the surface world and their violent actions against their surface counterparts can be interpreted as a manifestation of the unconscious mind's rebellion against the conscious mind's suppression. The film suggests that neglecting or denying the shadow aspects of oneself can have devastating consequences, as the repressed elements will always find ways to express themselves, often in destructive ways. Through the characters' experiences, the film highlights the importance of acknowledging and integrating all aspects of oneself, both the light and the dark. It suggests that true wholesomeness and self-understanding can only be achieved by confronting and reconciling with one's shadow self. Looking at the film this way, Addie's smile at the end is not merely an expression of triumph, but also a testament to the profound relief that she feels after her harrowing ordeal against Red. The experience has changed her, forcing her to confront and rediscover hidden aspects of herself. Through this difficult self-journey and rediscovery, she has managed to reconcile these previously unknown parts of her identity, leading to a transformative change in her character. This profound understanding and integration of her complete self is reflected in her final smile, which signifies not only victory over an external adversary, but a personal triumph of self-acceptance and growth. Diving even deeper, there seems to be an emphasis on American culture and an American experience. This is evident through the inclusion of numerous American cultural references, suggesting that the film may be offering a unique critique aimed specifically at Americans. These Easter eggs could be interpreted as symbols or metaphors that represent various aspects of American society, values, and behaviors. By incorporating these cultural elements, the film encourages viewers, particularly Americans, to reflect on their own culture and consider how it might be portrayed or perceived by others. The intentional incorporation of Hands Across America as a pivotal element in the narrative underscores a distinctly American phenomenon, emphasizing a unique moment in the nation's history where citizens joined hands to form a human chain across the country. This deliberate reference serves a dual purpose. It not only anchors the narrative within a specific cultural and historical context, but also subtly foreshadows the broader implications of the Tethered uprising, hinting at a nationwide, interconnected conflict. Furthermore, Addie's mention of fleeing to Mexico implies that the Tethered uprising is a uniquely American conflict, suggesting that the root of the problem lies within the nation's own social, political, and historical fabric. The inclusion of Native American motifs within the artwork strongly hints at the historical injustices perpetrated against indigenous people, suggesting that this is one of the crises and reckonings that Americans must confront. This interpretation aligns with the broader context of America's treatment of Native Americans, which includes forced displacement, cultural erasure, and broken treaties. The film could be interpreted as a broader call for Americans to engage in introspection and examine their own unconscious biases and beliefs. Additionally, it may be prompting us to confront and reconcile with the collective past of America, acknowledging the historical injustices and systematic issues that continue to shape our society. Even the simple title of the movie is multifaceted. US can also be used as an acronym, the US. On one level, US primarily represents the duality of Addie and Red, suggesting that there are two sides of the same coin, two selves inhabiting one person. This interpretation emphasizes the film's exploration of identity and the fractured nature of the self. Expanding outwards, us can also signify the collective consciousness of the characters, filmmakers, and even the audience. It suggests a shared experience implicating the viewers in the film's themes and inviting viewers to confront their own shadows. Furthermore, US can be seen as an abbreviation for the United States. This interpretation adds a socio-political dimension to the film, suggesting that the characters' struggles mirror the nation's own internal conflicts and contradictions. It raises questions about social justice, systematic oppression, and the collective unconscious of a nation grappling with its past and present. Another acronym for US can also stand for the unconscious. This psychoanalytic reading dwells into the hidden fears, desires, and traumas that shape individuals and their collective behavior. This reading suggests that the film's Doublegangers represent the darker aspects of the human psyche, these repressed urges that threaten to erupt and disrupt the fragile veneer of civilization. In conclusion, the symbol us is a rich and complex tapestry of meanings that invite multiple interpretations. It speaks to the film's exploration of identity, duality, social commentary, and the human condition. By leaving the meaning open to interpretation, the filmmakers encourage viewers to engage with the film on a personal and intellectual level, to confront their own biases and assumptions, and to grapple with the film's unsettling truths. So what do you think? What is your interpretation? Let me know down in the comments. I know this video is insanely long, so if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and always be careful of that white rabbit. You never know where it might lead you.